This thing appeared out of nowhere. Ryuji Furuya says it looks like another world and asks why there are dungeons in modern Japan. He says that he has seen this dungeon before. He reports hearing footsteps and expresses alarm, saying that there is no. Ryuji reveals that 2 weeks ago, during the summer break before ninth grade, he fell into a pothole in the road and, when he regained consciousness, found himself in another world. The king explains that their world is on the brink of destruction and calls Ryuji a brave, summoned hero. The king asks him to defeat the demon king and save this world. Ryuji Furuya says he doesn't want to and can't. The king asks how he can't. He explains that he has entrance exams next year, school starts in 2 weeks, and asks to be taken back to his world. The princess says it's okay and they'll send Ryuji back to his world, but it will require a lot of magic stones, so they'll have to wait. The man turns to the princess and calls her Daenerys. She's a typical, beautiful isekai princess. Ryuji Furuya asks how long they'll have to wait. The queen informs him that since they've used up all their magic stones to summon the hero, it will take 50 years unless the demon king kills them. He says that he would like to go back now, and the girl says that if he defeats the demon king, he will be able to return home immediately, since he will most likely have a huge magical stone. Ryuji Furuya announces that he has decided to defeat the demon king to return home. Several months later, Ryuji Furuya, armed with a sword and shield, prepares to fight the demon, who charges at him with an axe and delivers a series of blows. He says that even though he was summoned because of his potential as a hero, if he can't become stronger, he will be no different from an ordinary person. Ryuji Furuya, breathing heavily and leaning on his knees, reports that he is healed. The girl thanks Ryuji Furuya and says he's more of a hero now, explaining that she started to worry when he nearly died from the level 1 slime. He says he feels like he's getting stronger, but warns him not to talk like a schoolboy and explains that he needs to be careful. Ryuji Furuya informs that, in any case, princess, it doesn't matter that she came here alone. The woman says low-level monsters pose no threat to her and asks if he's worried about her. She also offers to work for him if he recovers quickly and can fight without interruption. He says it's a bit grim and that she's stronger than him. Ryuji Furuya says thank you. The girl says she will help Ryuji until he learns to heal himself and explains that it would be problematic if he died, and also says that he can thank her now. A year has passed. He reports the fall of a huge creature. The woman says she didn't expect it would take Ryuji a whole year to clear the first dungeon and worries about the future. Ryuji explains that he learned magic, so the next dungeon will be cleared faster, and asks why the woman is still following him. The woman informs him that it's impossible to use magic if his mana runs out. Ryuji Furuya says he knows, but the woman explains that she'll accompany Ryuji until he learns how to create potions, as relying solely on magic is dangerous. Ryuji Furuya thanks him for this. After 6 months, he reports that the second dungeon is protected and says that he can make healing potions. The girl asks how naive he is to think he can protect all the dungeons and asks how many there are. Ryuji Furuya says the main goal is defeating the Demon King and questions whether it's necessary to protect everything. The girl explains that he's nowhere near the dungeon bosses, and until he easily closes all the dungeons, she can't stop dreaming about him. He says it's time to stop accompanying him. The girl explains that there's no point in being a fool, because if Ryuji runs out of mana in the dungeon, potions won't be able to restore it, so she'll accompany him until he learns how to create mana potions. 5 years later, the girl expresses surprise. Ryuji Furuya says it's crap. In the background, a dragon roars, and a man with a sword and shield flies toward it. Ryuji Furuya says it was close, but he made it. Ryuji says that if they keep this up, they'll be able to defeat the Demon King in 2 years, and that half the dungeons remain to be cleared. The girl sadly informs him that she's dragging Ryuji down. Ryuji Furuya says that with his abilities, it is problematic to fight and defend at the same time. He can make mana potions, so he asks to wait for him at the castle. He says he doesn't understand what's going on. The girl explains that he could praise. Ryuji Furuya says he's glad Daenerys is here and thanks her. Daenerys confirms this with a sound. The girl explains that the humans of this world are incapable of defeating the Demon King, but if it's Ryuji, she's confident he can do it, and he adds that he'll give it his all. The girl says she'll wait for him at the castle. 10 years have passed, and he's been on the brink of death many times, but he still manages to defeat the Demon King. The king thanks Ryuji for defeating the Demon King, and, on behalf of all the beings in this world, expresses his gratitude to him from the bottom of his heart. The king speaks, asking if Ryuji truly wants to return to his world. The king states that, if possible, he wants him to marry Daenerys and inherit his throne. The girl smiles with her eyes closed. He says he wants to return to his hometown and see his family again, and the woman says she's sorry. The woman sobs, and the old man addresses her as a princess. The woman casts a spell, and light appears around Ryuji Furuya. The girl says that she is a queen and must protect her people. He tells Daenerys to take care of herself, and she tells him to shut up. The girl says, "Go already." He reports that he has returned to his world. Ryuji Furuya asks Kaiko what's wrong and calls her by name. Mitsuhashi Kaiko tells him they were in the same class since elementary school and that she's his childhood friend. He says the girl is the same as always and asks if she's still in middle school. The girl replies with a question of what? He says that 10 years haven't passed in this world and asks what about him. The guy asks the girl Kaiko for a mirror for a second. Ryuji Furuya reveals that this tsundere princess sent him back to his middle school days just for him. The inscription tells the name of the place, Furutani. He says that he has finally returned home after 10 years. The woman asks Ryuji what's wrong and asks if she has anything on her face. Ryuji explains that he simply hasn't seen her in a while and was in a completely different world until yesterday. The woman says Ryuji had a nightmare and laughs. Ryuji thinks that's exactly how it will be taken. The woman asks what Ryuji is talking about and the woman confirms. Ryuji Furuya takes boxes from the shelf and insists he stay in charge while she and his dad go shopping, asking if they've agreed. Ryuji says sure and wishes him luck. Ryuji Furuya announces that he's going to get chips and soda and then watch some anime and that he should enjoy the real world. He explains that this world is much better. Ryuji says he's glad to be back in size. The girl tells him Ryuji's parents are in trouble and asks where he's been. Ryuji, surprised, replies, "Mom and Dad." The girl reports that the car they were driving was hit by a truck, and unfortunately, the death was instantaneous. He wonders if there was some kind of mistake and muses that once he gets back, it seems like a joke. He says that the cursed demon king, or the price of his destruction, are the only reasons that come to his mind. Ryuji Furuya reports that he then gave up the sea of the dead that were in it, and death and hell gave up the dead. The girl asks Ryuji if it will be okay if she leaves the ashes here, and Ryuji thanks Keiko. A ringing sound is heard in the background of the house. The girl says she'll go open the door. He looks sadly at the photographs of his father and mother. Ryuji Furuya says he finally defeated the Demon King and returned to them. But what just happened? There are sounds of footsteps and speech behind the door that they are related and they need to resolve a couple of issues. The man asks Ryuji how much insurance he got from them and says that it's a lot. Ryuji Furuya asks if it's his uncle. The woman explains that all the insurance payments and inheritance belong to his aunt and uncle, and since he's still a child, he won't get anything by law. He asks, surprised, what? The man says that if they don't give him the money, they'll turn him over to the police and asks if he wants to be sent to a juvenile correctional facility. A friend tells Ryuji she's going home. A man explains that there should be a luxury watch somewhere around here and he'll pick it up. Another man says that dad won't fit into a suit, so he'll take a designer suit and laughs. The man demands that they hurry up and hand over the money, asking if Ryuji received compensation from the shipping company, while another man orders them to hand over the land and the deeds to the house. The man explains that legally there's no point in hiring a lawyer. The woman asks where all the rings and jewelry are. Ryuji Furuya says he can't give away his parents' money and property. A man stands by a closet, another man stands by the wall, 3 men are talking on the carpet, and Ryuji Furuya wonders what these people are thinking and considers this all some kind of joke. The guy with the high collar says that if they can't reach an agreement, they'll have to resort to force. The man in the middle explains that they have their own methods for solving problems. The guy asks what he just said. The man with the cigarette asks if the guy knows who he is. The man in the jacket explains that he's the head of the main branch of the Takahashi family. The woman explains that the branch family has to contribute at least something. Ryuji Furuya says such intimidation won't work on him and that adults are acting like idiots. The man demands he watch his language and the woman calls him impudent and demands to be taught a lesson. The boy asks if his dad will give them more pocket money later. The man explains to hit him in a way that's not visible but not in the face. Another man asks Ryuji if he's scared. A guy yells ha and throws a punch. A man in glasses says aura and throws a punch. A man in a hat says ha and throws a punch. Suddenly, they lose sight of Ryuji Furuya. Ryuji quickly moves behind the villains. The men turn around and see that Ryuji Furuya is already behind them. Ryuji Furuya says that how slow they are slower than a level 1 slime and slower than a level 2 goblin. The guy says, don't move. The man with glasses says, don't move. The man with bangs asks what he's doing. Ryuji wonders if they feel pathetic after hearing those words. The men say that now they will definitely hurt Ryuji. 3 guys throw punches at the same time. The woman reports hearing strange noises. The man says he's wondering if the boys are okay. Ryuji Furuya says he's okay. He tells us not to worry. A woman tells Ryuichi, Ryuini, and Shioma that they are in pain and asks Shioma if he is okay. A man asks if Ryuichi is made of concrete. Ryuji Furuya informs his aunt and uncle that they won't be able to move or speak on their own until they answer all his questions. He uses his hypnosis skill. The man and woman listen to him. He says the man seems to be a professional at such things and constantly extorts other people's property by deceiving or threatening them. The man replies that stupid people can't do such things. He's smart and laughs, asking if Ryuji is surprised. Ryuji Furuya says he didn't expect this. He says, "Then you." Ryuji Furuya explains that the hypnosis skill wasn't useful in the fight against the Demon King. Now it can only be used to extract information from others. He explains that in this world, people have weak resistance to magic, making the skill easy to use. He reports that he received letters of condolence, as expected, from the Tanakashi Central House. The woman says that this is it. He confirms that he will receive half of it. The man thanks her for teaching him wisdom and says that he came late with condolences, so there is no need to come on the 7th and 40th days. Ryuji Furuya explains that his hypnotized aunt and uncle took all their money from the ATM, leaving only enough for their fare home, and even took out a loan. He then explains that they put it all in a bag and gave it to him. There wasn't as much in the bag as he thought. He hopes they learn a lesson from this. Ryuji Furuya says that if only he had been in the car with his parents, they wouldn't be dead, and if his parents were alive, his relatives wouldn't have come. He says he did the right thing by reaching out to his mom and dad. Ryuji reports that it was the first time he cried in front of his parents' ashes. A few weeks later, the girl asks Ryuji if he's seen the news, and Ryuji asks the girl if the harvest is good this month. The girl says dungeons have been appearing all over the world and insists it's news. Ryuji Furuya asks what other dungeons there are. She explains that military forces from all over the world have launched expeditions, but it all seems futile. In Japan, opposition parties are raising a fuss about whether the civil defense forces are abusing their power, and the opposition doesn't like to beat around the bush. The girl reports that there are monsters living in a dark underground labyrinth. The girl says that with the appearance of the dungeons, resources have been completely depleted, and that's insane. The girl confirms that experts say that if they continue like this, civilization will end. She says that if they return to a primitive society, she can't even imagine how they'll survive. Ryuji asks if they won't be able to watch anime. She reports that the government has called an emergency information meeting, but opposition parties are protesting and seem to be stalling everything. She explains that they say it's too early to explore the underground, and she's not entirely sure, but they seem to be against it. The girl explains that the depletion of resources is due to the appearance of dungeons, and the timeline is correct, and Ryuji Furuya reports that this is most likely the reason. The girl says the internet is in chaos, yes, and he says he'll take a quick look. Ryuji Furuya announces he's not going to watch online. The man stands behind police tape and won't let him through. He informs that this place is closed to passage. He explains that it is impossible to go further. Ryuji Furuya reports that he was able to easily pass them by using transparency tea and explains that they are on guard, but why did dungeons suddenly appear? The man explains that this entrance has also appeared. He says he's seen this dungeon before and asks why a dungeon from another world would appear in this one. He then explains that if that's the case, then he already has experience. Ryuji Furuya explains that the first level is slimes and the second is goblins. He says that he is not mistaken, and this is definitely a dungeon of another world, then says that perhaps he should look further. Ryuji Furuya says it's the same thing. He says that hunting monsters is the same. He explains that magic stones and ore appear after killing a monster. He says that not all is lost. If you hunt monsters that probably spawn endlessly, the resource problem will be solved. Ryuji Furuya explains that the fact that the military of all countries failed to explore the dungeons proves that the weapons of this world are ineffective against visiting monsters, and then the only remaining method is the same one used in the other world. There, resources were only available in dungeons. There were also people who hunted monsters and brought back the items they obtained. They became known as adventurers. Ryuji Furuya says he'll keep the dragon materials in his inventory, and hopefully, people will emerge who will become adventurers. He explains that he had the makings of an adventurer, so he thinks others will have the same potential. He says he's hungry after the dungeon and will buy lunch on the way home, near the exit from the first level of the dungeon. Ryuji Furuya says that, He says this number is level 1. He asks if this number is real. Ryuji Furuya says that there was no such number before he went down into the dungeon and shows level 1 on his palm. Ryuji Furuya then explains that he is going to lift the curse. He reports that there is no effect. One police officer asks another if he heard it, and the second replies that he didn't. There was silence. Ryuji Furuya announces invisibility and says, oops. The policeman says that it was his imagination, no matter how you look at it. He explains that it is an invisibility spell and how convenient it is. Ryuji Furuya says that with the appearance of such a thing, resources will only be depleted, and asks what will happen to their world. He says that the other one is right, but he remains silent. Ryuji Furuya explains that this is a rather convenient spell that allows you to travel between any points you visited, unless you're in a dungeon. Ryuji Furuya explains that it's a teleport. He says he's home. The man asks what he's teleporting out of the house. Ryuji Furuya says he forgot to buy himself lunch, but explains that he's too lazy to go outside right now. He reports that his stomach is growling. Ryuji says hello and calls Kaiko by name. Kaiko tells him that her mother asked her to bring Ryuji some beef stew and asks why he's still wearing his school uniform. Ryuji Furuya says he made beef with vegetables in a demi-glace sauce today, served with a fresh salad and bread. He says the dish is delicious and nutritious. The girl says she borrowed the plates. He says the food looks delicious. He wishes him bon appetit. The girl advises him to chew thoroughly. Ryuji Furuya says his aunt is the best cook. The girl asks him how the salad is and tells him she made it herself. He asks if the mayonnaise tastes like it's cut correctly and adds that it's store-bought mayonnaise. The girl indignantly asks what kind of comment that is and confirms that it is indeed true. He thanks her for the treat. The girl says they can play now, since they haven't done it in a while. Ryuji Furuya says he's busy and says no. The girl asks him why he's not the most outgoing person. He says yes, Keiko, and asks to take a look. Keiko asks what exactly. Ryuji Furuya reports that she doesn't seem to see, the girl says questioningly. He asks the girl to show him her hands. The girl agrees and asks what's wrong. He examines her hands and says there's nothing wrong. The girl says that's enough and asks what's wrong with her. Ryuji Furuya says thank you and asks him to pass it on to his aunt, and the girl says she's on her way. Ryuji Furuya ponders. He says the level indicator on his hand probably has something to do with dungeons. He explains that if he's right, it's rather odd that a hero who defeats a demon king is given a starting level and asks if it's an adventurer's level. The sound of snoring can be heard. Ryuji Furuya reports that there's not enough information to get the full picture, explains that staying in a dungeon for a long time is tiring, and tells everyone that tomorrow they can conquer the second dungeon in Ueno Park. He says it's time to lie down. A group of police officers moves forward with shields, preparing for a possible clash. The man says that neither electricity nor gunpowder can be used in the dungeon, and warns to be on guard. Ryuji Furuya asks if he's exaggerating too much, and explains that there's a dungeon there or something, but with that many people, there's nothing stopping them. A man with a shield stands under the streams of liquid and reacts. Two police officers notice a man trapped inside a clear bubble, which begins to crack. Above, a man warns against standing directly under the creatures hanging from the ceiling. On the right, a man commands to surround and attack the enemy. On the bottom right, a man is struck by a creature and says, "Gay." On the bottom left, a man in a helmet with a face shield is in pain. The guy says they've slowed down the slime, and the man says they need to destroy its core now. Ryuji Furuya reveals it was bait and explains that they can now proceed. A man with a gun stands next to a large creature lying on the ground. A guy announces they won. A man shouts, "Hooray!" Another man makes an "ooh" sound. First, the man tells her to collect all the magical slime and mana stones and to be mindful of dropped items. Then he tells Kaneko to keep an eye on the perimeter, to which Kaneko replies, "Yes." A police officer asks if anyone has been caught, and another reports that Officer Sato was crushed to death by a slime. The policeman announces that they are moving on, turning to the captain, who is silent, kneeling next to the man in uniform lying on the ground. Ryuji Furuya reports that they have 17 mana stones in total, 12 of which are from the self-defense forces and 10 from the fire department. He says the operation is over and they need to retreat, as well as carefully transport the body of Officer Sato. The man confirms this with a yes. Another man. The guy says, The man says he has a level on his hand and asks to show it. Ryuji Furuya tells him to get counseling, get benefits, and take time off. The man says he's suspended from duty as of today. The man confirms this. The guy says, "Eh?" The man says he can't understand why this happened and explains that he didn't see anything suspicious. He says he checked all the records and found no evidence of a break-in. Ryuji Furuya tells him to wait and asks what the man sees on his hand. The man says he sees level 2. The man says, "That's how it is," and he says he sees a level 3 warrior. The girl greets Ryuji Furuya and he says good morning. The girl explains that the numbers on the palm indicate an adventurer's level and profession, and also says she's heard that such numbers sometimes appear on those who complete a dungeon. Ryuji Furuya says, "Huh?" and reacts to the girl's words. He explains that there are already 20 of these in America, the largest number of them anywhere, and asks the girl if she watches TV. The girl explains that they have a true pioneering spirit. He reports that in Japan, there are 2 police officers with the same license plates. Ryuji Furuya explains that this means he's an adventurer, but there's an error with his level and his job isn't showing up. The girl says she's been staring at her hands for a long time too, and it would be cool to become an adventurer. The girl says that a lot of people admire adventurers these days, and that it's a profitable business, which is cool. He says that she might be right. Ryuji Furuya says good morning. Another guy says good morning and asks what all the fuss is about. The guy on the right asks Yokoyama how many floors he's conquered so far and encourages him. Yokoyama explains that he's currently on the 4th floor, where the monsters are quite strong. He asks him not to make too much noise, as he's doing this illegally. The girl on the right says that. The guy reports that Yokoyama has received the adventurer's mark. Ryuji Furuya says he's not sure. He says he'd like to go into the dungeon himself and test himself, but it's illegal until he graduates from high school, and there's already a law to that effect. The teacher tells Yokoyama to go to the principal's office and says he heard the police visited them. A guy in class says Yokoyama is so cool, and another student asks if he's been discovered. Ryuji Furuya remains silent. The teacher announces that class can begin. A girl asks the teacher if she can go to the restroom. He explains that he needs to go for a long time and won't be back soon, and the girl says he didn't have to ask. On the wall at the top right, there is a sign for the men's restroom. In the top right panel, Ryuji Furuya explains that he didn't come to arrest anyone, but to have a little chat, and apologizes for interrupting him right out of class. In the middle right panel, Ryuji Furuya explains the situation while sitting on the toilet. In the bottom right panel, a man explains. The man asks the guy if he can tell his level and profession. The guy says that he is level 6 and he is a thief. The man says that if he's not lying, the highest level currently belongs to a guy from America who has reached level 8, and the other man laughs and says that's not true. Ryuji Furuya says, "Stop it, Yokoyama." The man says that since he's level 6, he's encountered something similar before. He asks what it is. The man explains that it's a rare item found in the dungeon, and they're known as scouts. The man says that usually only a person can see his own level, but with the help of a scout, one can see someone else's level too. Ryuji Furuya says he wants a scout like that. The man asks what kind of scout is that? The man asks Yokoyama to show him his hand, and Yokoyama apologizes and explains that he's not an adventurer, has never entered a dungeon and did it to become popular. He says to let me know if he gets a medal after graduating. The man says that it's understandable. What a shame. Ryuji Furuya says he figured he could fool everyone because the mark is only visible to its owner. He wonders if such people really exist. He informs that exploring the dungeons is extremely dangerous for those who haven't developed the mark, so entry is strictly restricted. He explains that this is true. Kunimi asks what they will do if they are not allowed through, and Ryuji Furuya says that everything will be fine. The man reports that the documents are in order and asks them to proceed. A man with short dark hair explains that the state cannot accuse them of anything. Exploring underground is their civil right and allows them to proceed, checking to see if they have received all the necessary documents. Ryuji Furuya reports that a lawyer posted a video on YouTube about how to get into the dungeon, and he prepared everything in advance. The man says he hasn't seen any sign of the mark and asks his boss how he is. The boss explains that he hasn't seen anything either. The man understands the situation. He reports that people have already started making strategy videos, and the man explains that the cameras don't work in the dungeon, so the videos mostly consist of conversations and notes from past runs. Ryuji Furuya reports that he printed out the map from the video, but it doesn't have the passage on the left. The guy asks if something's wrong, and the man replies that everything's fine and suggests they move on. The man explains that he shouldn't disturb the boss. Perhaps the video's creator simply forgot about this passage. A man says a slime has appeared, and Ryuji Furuya says it's a slime. He says that the boss needs to be cornered and calls him here. The man runs after him. A man says this wasn't in the guide and there shouldn't be any slimes here. The man shouts that a slime has appeared, and another man reacts with a cry of surprise. The man says he can't wait to get his money and that he's accumulated a lot of views. The girl asks if he's talking about the one with the fake dungeon capturing guide. Ryuji Furuya reports that the views are insane. The girl says she doesn't understand who's even looking at this nonsense. He says he's heard about a lot of companies going bankrupt and suggests it could be because of layoffs. Ryuji Furuya says he'll draw the attention of the boss, and the man asks him to kill them. Ryuji Furuya explains that it's not a given they'll be able to defeat even one, and there are two of them at once and they don't stand a chance. The man tells Kunimi he's out of breath. Ryuji. He says he needs a weapon and looks at the burning stick from the torch, which begins to melt. Then he notices it and says, "Huh?" The man says he has legs. Ryuji Furuya speaks to the slime and orders Kunimi to be released. The man thinks he's going to die. The boy tells the boss he'll save him and calls him Kunimi. The boss coughs and turns to the boy. Ryuji Furuya says that the man has a wife and daughter, so it's useless, just run away. The man says that's precisely why. The man says he won't be able to look his family in the eye if he abandons his subordinate and promises to get him out at any cost, assuring him he won't die. He yells at the boss. Ryuji Furuya says he met his boss 3 years ago and has been going back and forth since leaving juvenile detention. A man and woman in uniform say they'd be happy to help Kunimi get back on her feet. The man asks Kunimi if he accidentally approached the cash register. He explains that, in fact, they were all just chatting for much longer. The woman apologizes and says she seems to have miscalculated the receipts, and the other man explains that, given Kunimi's past, Ryuji Furuya reports that he's been dealt a blow by a boss who believes everyone deserves a chance to start over. He explains that he didn't believe him at first and assumed the boss was just pretending to be trusting. The boy greets Kunimi and tells him that he needs to sell some goods from the warehouse to the black market, and Tatsumi will send him the route. Kunimi tells the older man not to drag him into all this and explains that he's started his life anew. The guy refuses and says he has a new life, warning him to keep trying and he'll call the police. The man then asks him to show the contents of the truck and asks. The guy tells her what to do with the truck. The man warns her to stay away from it. The man yells that the guy will know who he's talking to, idiot. Ryuji Furuya says the truck is on fire and the flames are spreading quickly. He advises that everyone should move away quickly to avoid injury. The top right panel says, "This is the end." The top left panel shows a man in a wheelchair saying, "This is the end." The man reports that the truck and the goods are damaged. Ryuji Furuya asks Kunimi how his injuries are. The man says everything is fine and there's no need to worry, everything is insured, and he has savings for such situations. The guy explains that next time, he shouldn't try to put out the fire himself. The man says, "Boss," then he reports. The man says he can buy a new truck, but no one will replace him, and asks him to take better care of himself. The text says he's a good man. Ryuji Furuya says everything happened because of him, because he believed the fake video. The man says, "God, and if you exist?" The man begs and asks to save at least him. The man says it's a trap and warns Ryuji Furuya. Ryuji Furuya falls backward from the explosion, and the man stands in the distance with his hand raised. He says he made it in time. Ryuji Furuya says he'll use healing magic, and the other one should keep the victim still. He says there's still help for both of them, so there's no need to worry. The man says Ryuji Furuya saved him and asks what's wrong with boss. He says everything is fine, and he's fine. The man tries to say something but can't. The guy is surprised and confused. Ryuji Furuya says he was just passing by. The man explains that his prayers were answered. The girl says that if Ryuji hadn't come, they would have been killed. He says he wants to know the other person's name so he can thank them properly. The man explains that he prefers to remain anonymous and warns that if he doesn't change his gear, he'll die in obscurity. The guy says this floor belongs to slimes, and if they plan to hunt them, it's best to catch them one at a time in a space about 30 meters wide. The girl explains that if two people attack, one should be the target and the other should hit, then take turns. The guy says that. Ryuji Furuya says hunting and targeting. He says that even among the police and self-defense forces there are many casualties, and this guy took out the slimes with one blow and asks who he is. The text states that the scout is a rare loot dropped by monsters that allows one to see another person's level and profession. The Japanese government bought all the found specimens from adventurers at an exorbitant price, but Ryuji Furuya says it's a reading lens that magnifies letters 1.5 times. He explains that even the smallest letters can be read with it. He says PP and says it's only 3 to combat damage and calls it trash. He explains it looks good and says hee hee. The image contains no speech bubbles or text to convey action or dialogue. It shows a girl standing in a half crouch. Ryuji tells him to come in, then asks Kaiko what's wrong. Kaiko says she came to study with Ryuji. The girl asks if he's a scout. Ryuji Furuya says the letter A and says he forgot. The girl says the model is good and asks where she got it. He explains that he's currently making costume 29, which would be perfect for cosplay. The man explains that the costume won't fit the design. The girl says that this option will suit her too and asks where Ryuji Furuya found it. He expresses surprise. The girl says she's asking what's going on. The man says he's a level 1 warrior. Ryuji Furuya reveals that Kaiko has an adventurer's mark and explains that she didn't enter the dungeon, but he can still see her. The girl says hello and informs the people with this mark have every chance of becoming adventurers. It is reported that if a newbie goes into a dungeon without an experienced guide, then in the other world it too often ends badly. Ryuji Furuya says it's a rare lottery prize and he won't buy it. The woman says she's jealous of him and adds, "That's how it is." He says there's no point in thinking about it now and that they'll solve problems as they arise. He also explains that his profession isn't showing up, which is most likely a glitch, and that his level itself is strange. The girl says she'll stop by and offers to help her with her homework. Ryuji Furuya reports that his knowledge has improved significantly over the holidays, and even won first place on his exams. The girl asks how he did it. Ryuji Furuya explains that he simply read his textbooks in his spare time. The girl asks if he's definitely not lying and if he could actually cheat. He says he's entered another world where he's honed his skills. The girl asks if he's serious and then asks where this other world is. Ryuji Furuya says yes. The girl says she wants to go too, asks if he's somewhere near the station, and explains that after she took the winter courses, she, too, found it easier to cope. Ryuji Furuya explains that the other world isn't like the preparatory courses. The image shows the facade of a residential building with an entrance door and windows, surrounded by bushes and trees. It does not speak or act. Ryuji reports what happened and explains that he may not have a chance against physical strength, but he has no chance against magic. The woman explains that the copper turtle will continue to regenerate until Ryuji destroys its core, which is located under its shell. Ryuji asks where she keeps the core. The girl says they need to speed up, otherwise he'll rise again. Ryuji Furuya explains that it's not as easy as it seems, and one blade won't be enough. The woman says that, if you think about it, this is not the kind of monster that a newbie can handle alone, and asks if he needs help. He replies that he doesn't need help and says that it's kind of offensive. Ryuji falls backward, screaming as a huge, spiked turtle opens its mouth. Ryuji announces that the turtle has been reborn and thunder erupts from his sword. The woman explains that they will likely be here for a long time. The sounds of impact are repeated 3 times. Ryuji Furuya says this time he made coffee that he brewed himself. He explains that it's made from beans he roasted and ground himself. He announces that the copper turtle is finally finished. The girl remains silent, holding a cup of drink. The upper right fragment shows the copper turtle breaking apart. Ryuji Furuya says, yes, then reports that he's regained his senses. His body feels lighter and his vision is better. The girl explains that she sees Ryuji Furuya leveling up and that it's time to take a break, and also says he did a great job. He asks where the tea set is from. The woman explains that she got it from her storage and invites them to sit down. The girl says she'll put the materials and the copper turtle drops in the storage and expresses a desire to learn the same skill. Ryuji Furuya reports that he hasn't seen his level displayed anywhere and asks if there's any way to find out. The girl explains that Ryuji's level just increased when he killed the copper turtle. He says that the feeling of lightness was a leveling up and asks to tell him more. The man says that he didn't talk about it. Ryuji Furuya says that if only he remembered how many times he's already leveled up. The girl says she's not afraid and remembers everything, and then asks if he can answer the question for now. Ryuji Furuya asks if she remembers everything. The girl explains that as the level increases, intelligence and all other parameters increase, and says that if she sees something at least once, she will remember it in every detail, then says that she baked the treat herself and offers to try it. Ryuji Furuya says the more monsters he kills, the stronger he becomes. The woman says that's generally true. He says that if his skills remain in the other world, then, after killing the Demon King, he can become the smartest in his homeland. The girl explains that she was afraid Ryuji might not like the taste. Ryuji Furuya says it's a copper turtle, and the girl says how resilient these creatures are. The woman says it's time to leave. He says he'll go first. Ryuji Furuya runs toward the wounded creature, which is making noises and spraying liquid. The creature begins to disintegrate and falls to the floor. He says he thought she would be as hard as the first one and asks what. Then he says, Tiesk, 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 stepping on the ground with his sword. Ryuji Furuya says it's clear and reports that it seems to be a level-up issue. All of his stats have improved. He says that these are her favorite sweets, which is why she is so upset. The girl says the word baked goods. Ryuji Furuya says he first killed 3 slimes, then the goblins from the second floor, and that he managed to remember everything. He reports that he's currently leveled up to 73, but the combination of an intelligence boost and a level increase is a bit much. He says he can now remember all his favorite anime lines. He reveals that when he defeated the Demon King, his level was above 1400. It's announced that it's time to begin the exam, and Ryuji Furuya tells them to keep an eye on him so they don't cheat. It's explained that this is the 3rd general exam since returning from the other world. The girl reports that there are 40 students in this class, 20 of whom are girls and 20 of whom are boys. The man explains that there are 4 students in the class who don't like studying, 3 who like studying, and 33 who are undecided. The girl explains that 10 students like sports. Ryuji Furuya says he knows the answers to all the problems and that all the work in that world wasn't in vain, but that all it took was just reading the textbook once. He says, "Hooray and thanks." The teacher announces that he will announce the results now, and that Furuya took first place, having scored 496 points in 5 subjects. The teacher tells Ryuji Furuya that they need to talk about his future and asks him to stop by the staff room after class. Ryuji Furuya says that's great. Ryuji is surprised. Ryuji says it's a hammer. The other guy says he still can't believe it. The man says he's amazed by Ryuji's knowledge and asks what the magic is. Ryuji Furuya says sorry and informs that the teacher called him, so he will go. The man asks how Ryuji grew up so quickly and says that if he wants to go to that college, he needs to decide on a high school. Ryuji confirms that he's thinking about it. Another man points to Ryuji and says he's that kid, and a third man calls Ryuji. Ryuji Furuya says he's in trouble and standing out from the crowd is too much of a hassle. He explains that it was like child's play for him, but it's better to try to show an average level of knowledge. He says that with such attention, he won't be able to dive into the dungeons. The man asks if this is the one who won first place, and the other man replies that it's Furuya, a second year. Ryuji Furuya says he risked his life to defeat the Demon King, and he's not going to waste his chance for a peaceful life. He says that this is the story. The girl says that this is not all, and suggests making up another story about how she transformed into a villain. Ryuji Furuya is silent. Ryuji says he can't solve the problem, and suggests using a certain equation. The girl tells him he's a true hero from another world, and very smart. Ryuji wonders if there's any point in asking her to trust him. The guy says his brain is craving sweets after homework, and the girl says yes. The girl asks Ryuji if he wants to go with her to the assessment, and Ryuji says he definitely does. Ryuji Furuya says he wants to know what a level assessment is. The girl says she heard about the construction of a high school for adventurers in the city center, where only those with an adventurer's mark are admitted, and explains that representatives from the Ministry of Culture have decided to assess 3rd graders at the high school using. He says that's how it is. The girl asks if Ryuji wants to know if he has the adventurer's mark, and even asks him to remember his story about the other world. He replies with a question about whether he doesn't. The girl remains silent, her mouth open. Ryuji Furuya says he's too lazy to go there and isn't interested in anything. The girl says she doesn't particularly want to go alone and asks Ryuji to listen to her. Ryuji Furuya remains silent. The girl asks if it's true. Ryuji Furuya explains that he already knows He explains that it's a sideways glance and says that she's been using this trick since she was in diapers. The girl asks if Ryuji Furuya will go with her. Ryuji Furuya says he's lost. The girl tells him he's a great hero and thanks him. He says he's going, the girl agrees. He asks about her level of assessment. Ryuji Furuya informs her that monsters can be found in this area, but they are very strong. The girl explains that useful items can be found here and that she should be careful not to get lost. He says that not being able to see your level is inconvenient. The girl says she never thought about it but admits that it might be more convenient, although it would add problems. Ryuji Furuya reveals that he's heard rumors that some of the nobles who claim to be high level are actually making it all up, and explains that if the level sees everything, they won't be able to pretend anymore, right? And also says that he feels that this will lead to another brawl. He says he doesn't understand why anyone would lie about their level. The woman says that people like to look down on those below them, and even Ryuji will do that when he surpasses her in level. Ryuji says he doesn't intend to do that. The woman says that's what everyone says. Ryuji Furuya says he was summoned to this world using enough energy to last the state for 50 years. The woman says he is the savior of this world, and more often than not, it is he who saves her. He explains that he admires her too much to look down on her, and notes that she managed to perform an extremely complex spell, knowing that there will be no second attempt. The girl says that if there are no changes, then in a year she will become an ordinary woman. Ryuji Furuya explains that the summoned hero turned out to be a frail schoolboy who needs to be accompanied everywhere so that he doesn't die, and that he, of course, has become a little stronger. But the girl constantly babysits him and can't spare a little time for herself. He says the girl is an amazing princess, and she explains that she won't succeed if she's asked to do the same. Ryuji Furuya says that even if he is level 100 or 1000, he will never be able to look down on anyone else. The girl says she can't believe he actually came. She says she thought he wouldn't come. Ryuji Furuya apologizes if he offended her. The girl asks him to shut up and just be quiet. It is reported that at the request of Daenerys, exploration of the dungeon was temporarily stopped that day. Ryuji Furuya explains that in this world, you can see your level and profession, and that discrimination based on level and profession may begin, which will make it difficult for those with less popular professions and low levels. He explains that he's a hero, so his level exceeds 1400, and that's a palm is shown with the inscription level 1. Ryuji Furuya says he has a bad feeling about this. He informs us that the building houses the city museum. He explains that an exhibition dedicated to the city's history is currently taking place there. Chairman Takahashi reports that according to their data, active exploration of underground areas is underway in all countries, including the United States. The man on the right says that when the existing resources are completely exhausted, new ones will have to be mined underground. The man on the left says that for the sake of Japan, it is necessary to send as many adventurers there as possible as quickly as possible, and confirms this with the word true. The man reports that, fortunately, many dungeons have appeared across the country, and that the percentage of adventurers among citizens is extremely high, a whopping 2%, while the global average is only 4 to 5%. He explains that these figures won't make much of a difference unless all 2% are found and sent to. The man says that talent scouting needs to be expanded, especially among young people. Ryuji Furuya explains that a law has been passed allowing high school students to enter dungeons, and that they are also planning to conduct a test to determine the level of talent among high school graduates. A man says that the decision to build a school for adventurers could determine the future of the country. The building is reportedly undergoing a level test. Ryuji Furuya says there are so many people here, it's amazing. A girl says there are tons of people from their school, and they all want to become adventurers. The guy says they're just trying to make some extra money, and the girl explains that even hunting slimes from the ground floor can earn you several times more per month than a typical office worker. The man explains that the equipment is expensive, and if it breaks, they'll have to pay over 100 million yen. Ryuji Furuya says he took it too seriously, and the girl says she understands his feelings, but it's too much. He announces that Mitsuhashi Kaiko is next, and says he's on his way. The man explains how difficult it is to deal with children, and how many problematic ones there are, and he wants to go home already. He says the inspector is at his wit's end. The man reports that, according to the scout, the girl is a level 1 warrior. The girl is overjoyed and shouts, "Hooray!" Several students comment that it's amazing that it's Mitsuhashi from their school, and one of them asks if they're serious. Ryuji Furuya says that the adventurer's mark is not a very common occurrence, and several people in the crowd report that it is a class. The man advises her to apply to the Adventurer's Academy. The girl says she will definitely do so and is looking forward to it. The man names the next person, him, who replies that he's coming. Ryuji Furuya announces that he is a level 1. A man with headphones listens to him, while in the background, 2 students watch the scene. He asks what's there and says that he still can't see his profession. The man explains that it's. An employee informs Ryuji Furuya that his mark is missing. Ryuji Furuya asks why. Then Ryuji Furuya asks him to wait a bit and tells him to look again at the level 1 on his hand. The girl tells Ryuji to stop, explaining that she understands the offense but asks him not to embarrass himself. Ryuji says that's not the issue and that he definitely has the mark of an adventurer. The man says the child definitely has a level 1 on his hand, but the woman says there's no point in saying too much. The man explains that he has no profession and would be better off abandoning the idea of becoming an adventurer. Ryuji Furuya asks what he means. The man explains that to conquer a dungeon, people form parties of several people, because if you go in there alone, you can die even on the first floor. Ryuji Furuya reports that another problem has arisen. The man explains that in a party, a balance is important between attackers and those who will defend from the rear, and that a profession determines special skills, spells, and bonus status points. The man says that without a profession, his contribution to the party will be 0, and says that, roughly speaking, he will become dead weight. Ryuji Furuya reveals that his job title is not displayed due to a random error, and explains that he does have a job title. He can feel it. He says that TI Ryuji Furuya says he's strong enough to go underground even alone. The man yells, "Enough!" and says Ryuji is just a kid who's never even been there, explaining that he's been to level 6, level 5. The man says Ryuji can't understand how dangerous the dungeon can be. Ryuji says the man is talking about the hero who visited the 999th floor. The guy asks what's going on. The girl asks what they're arguing about and says Ryuji is overreacting. Ryuji replies that he didn't mean for things to get that way. Ryuji Furuya apologizes for arguing despite never having entered the dungeon and says he never imagined they were fighting the crazy bees from the 5th floor. The man remains silent. The girl asks Ryuji to come with her, and he agrees. The man explains that information about the 5th floor is still strictly classified and wonders why he brought up the crazy bees. The girl says Ryuji was surprisingly unapproachable and blames him for it. Ryuji says they should apply to that school together and adds that he's glad they both have the adventurer's mark. Ryuji confirms this with the word, "yeah." Ryuji Furuya asks Mitsuhashi if she has a minute. Mitsuhashi replies that it's Ito. He tells her it's Keiko's classmate and asks who it is. He reports that a level 1 hunter's mark was found on him. The text next to it explains that it's level 1 hunter. The girl says it's true and amazing. The text says it's level 1 warrior. Ryuji Furuya announces that there will be a careers orientation nearby and asks the girl if she wants to go with him. The girl says she doesn't even know. The man on the right thinks they both look happy and that it's worth watching. Ryuji Furuya makes a sound of surprise. Ryuji says the girl must listen to him and go with him. The girl agrees. The girl says goodbye to Ryuji. The boy says he's pleased to know someone he knows also has the adventurer's mark. The girl says she understands. Ryuji Furuya stands behind them. He is silent. Greenwich, UK. The girl reports that they are finding it increasingly difficult to climb up to the 4th floor and will be going down to the 5th floor today. Isabella Lune Krinvich informs them that they are then heading to the dungeon, explaining that it is a dangerous dungeon and therefore asks them to remain vigilant. The three men say that perhaps they shouldn't be counted on. The woman reports that in most cases, the offensive type profession is either a warrior or a martial artist, and explains that she's never heard of anyone other than herself having the Holy Knight level. She describes Holy Knight in games as something like a high-class profession. There is a dungeon in the county of Greenwich. This is the 1st floor. 3 slime-like creatures slowly crawl down the hallway. The woman says the slime's been looking a bit cute lately. The man says not to relax. Ryuji Furuya says fine. The man explains that they completely exterminated all the slimes yesterday, and that's weird. The girl tells them to concentrate, and the man says that the warriors will go forward and attack. The rest will cover the rear and monitor the situation. A woman casts a healing spell. A man says thank you. The man casts a fireball. The man screams in pain. The guy says he's curious where they come from. The girl screams from behind. 2 men fight a monster. One of them screams, and a girl in armor strikes and lets out a battle cry. Ryuji Furuya thanks him, and the girl explains that the monsters are most likely stuck in a time paradox, but given all the resources and experience. The woman explains that the game features professions, levels, and skill progression, as well as location changes, making the game feel more real. The woman confirms this and warns caution, explaining that, unlike in a game, you can actually get hurt here. The woman announces that as soon as everyone is ready, she will begin the descent to the 2nd floor. The girl says she hates goblins and that they are always hunting down female adventurers. A monster growls, standing behind a girl. The girl screams in fear as the monster grabs her dress. The girl tries to fight off the monsters, who laugh and attack her. The girl says fireball and orders to receive, goblin perversion. The man lies on the ground and makes sounds. Ryuji Furuya says it's amazing that the Countess was able to defeat the goblin on her own, and notes that her hard work leveling up hasn't been in vain, reminding her to remember to use MP potions. The Countess explains that MP potions are so. The girl says she'll clear the way straight to the 2nd floor exit, confirming this with the word, okay. A group of monsters makes noise and approaches. One of them steps on the floor. The woman explains that it's not a sword, but a staff, and explains that staffs cannot be used for attack. The woman explains that staffs are meant for defense and support, not for attack. A group of monsters is making noise. Ryuji Furuya reports that things are bad because the monsters have formed a group and orders them to protect the Countess from being surrounded. The girl in the hat asks if this is related to the noise from her magic. The Countess quickly rushes into battle. In the top right, a woman says that shouldn't they be protecting the Countess and not the other way around? A man next to her says she's strong, and another man says he didn't even have time to blink. In the bottom left, a man curses, and a woman explains that at least she could have helped the Countess, since she has reserves of physical strength. The man says that they have their share of good sense and offers to help the countess, to which the other man agrees. Ryuji Furuya announces that it's time for his healing magic. The man with the weapon and shield says, "Heh heh 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 heh." The woman says the word treatment. The man thanks the woman, and another man asks the countess to treat him too. The girl asks what it means. Isabella announces that with her level up, she's gained the healing skill and will now be helping with healing, to which one of the girls laughs, while another says, "Never mind." Against the backdrop of the castle, someone thanks the Lord for their efforts, while another says they did a good job. The woman reports that these are the fruits of their visit today: magic and iron ore, loot, and materials from monsters. The man says the countess's vault has an incredible capacity. The man marvels at how much there is. Ryuji Furuya explains that the government will buy everything for approximately £100,000 sterling after sales and expenses. The remaining amount will be divided among all the party members. He also regrets not finding a spy, otherwise the amount would have risen to 1 million. The man thanks the Count. Isabella says that Viscount Visitation and Duke Grosvenor have decided to honor them with their attention. The man asks Isabella if she's forgotten anything and explains why she's wearing such shameless attire. The man explains that House Krivnich is the sole owner of the dungeon, but this is only with the permission of House Grosvenor, the original owner. Another man says that the girl in such gear is only a disgrace to the family's honor, but he would like to take a closer look. The girl asks what they want in. The man says 50%. The girl asks a question. The man explains that if they give him 50% of what they find in the dungeon, he'll close his eyes forever. Several people in the group say half. The woman says she's willing to give up her own share, but that she can't expect more, and that each of the party members risked their lives, so their reward can't be reduced. The woman says she managed to say this. The woman reports that the number of dead and missing in the dungeon has already exceeded 100,000, and it's such a dangerous place that she can't manage it on her own, so she's negotiating with the government to hand over control of the dungeon. She asks to inspect Countess Isabella's cleavage, her husband. The man says the lowest floor is the 8th, if he's not mistaken, and that's the current world record. He explains that no one in the world would be foolish enough to climb into the dungeon alone, and asks that no one make up examples out of thin air. Ryuji Furuya discusses the wisdom of creating a private company to manage the dungeon and taking over the monopoly from the state. He reports that Isabella is now level 9, and her intelligence has increased significantly, perhaps seeing further than they do. The man announces that they're done for today and reminds him not to forget to add his 50,000 tip to the distribution. Another man asks what about the clothing inspection, since he promised him that. The woman is silent, and the man tells the countess. The girl says that as long as she remains in England, she will be forever a prisoner in the cage created by the Duke. Ryuji Furuya says he's been sneezing non-stop and asks what it is. The text says the story takes place in Tokyo, Japan. He says that after leveling up he never got sick, and maybe he relaxed too much, and also asks if he caught a cold. Ryuji Furuya reports that he has been strengthened just in case and says that he is being treated. He reports that he's now fully healed and says he's doing great. He then explains that this is the Ueno Park dungeon and it's time to clear it out. He uses invisibility and teleportation. Ryuji Furuya reports that he's thoroughly checked every floor to make sure, but it appears this is indeed the Demon King's dungeon. He explains that in another world, this was the deepest and most dangerous dungeon. He tells you that the next floor is the 1000th floor and explains that in another world, a demon king lived on that floor. Ryuji Furuya says he doesn't understand what's going on here and wonders who it is down there. He explains that he's only fought him once, but his detection skill makes it clear it's definitely not the demon king. He says that he sees him for the first time and asks if he is the boss of this dungeon, and also calls him a dragon of pitch darkness and big. He says that he is a god slayer and asks what is stronger, a dragon of darkness or a god slayer, and the dragon announces that it can't take it anymore and is going to burn everything to the ground. Then the dragon warns that if anyone comes near, it will burn them too. Ryuji Furuya asks if the dragon has just noticed its tail has been cut off. The dragon roars and flies forward. The dragon continues to fly. The image shows a huge flying monster with outstretched wings that makes a loud noise when it takes off. Ryuji reports that the dragon's tail has lost weight and now can't balance properly in flight, so an aerial battle is out of the question. Ryuji jumps and says, "Hop," then uses ice arrows. If we compare it purely by firepower, the dragon would be more powerful than the Demon King. Ryuji Furuya notices the attack from a blind spot and expresses surprise. Then an explosion occurs. He says he hit it and gasps. The dragon makes a sound. He says the word meteorite. at the sight of a huge meteorite flying towards the Earth. The dragon reports that the enemy fell for his trick, and Ryuji Furuya says he has plenty of his own tricks and thought he'd have a little more fun, but that'll do. Ryuji Furuya explains that it's good that he can nullify meteorites, so it reports that the level marker remains at level 1 and has not changed. The guy says the Dark Dragon's corpse is huge and still drops a lot of valuable items, but he won't be able to carry it all off in one go. He explains that if he leaves the loot here for 24 hours, the dungeon will swallow it all up, which would be a huge loss. Ryuji Furuya reports that the most important thing must be somewhere here, and then says that he found the dungeon core. It is reported that the dungeon core allows you to freely move around all its floors, and that it is an extremely useful item if you need to collect certain materials or level up. Ryuji Furuya reports that he still has the core from the king's dungeon, which would be useful in another world, but in this dungeon it was completely useless and inconvenient, so with this he will advance faster. He reports that other dungeons may have also formed new cores, and says, "What tempo?" Ryuji Furuya says his main concern now is the loot and materials from the Black Dragon. He'll worry about spending them later, and he'll take as much as he can. He explains that he knew he wouldn't be able to carry everything, and his storage is already full. He says that everything has come in and speaks seriously. Ryuji Furuya says that if you think about it, he never filled it to the brim. He reports that he has been able to prove his powers, and it is time to implement his plan, which is to watch his favorite anime at any time for the sake of world peace. He says that he has returned and explains that Keiko has not yet become an adventurer. Ryuji Furuya tells him that he must bring him to life. He says that this year he decided to make a model airplane instead of a figurine, and explains that it will be a plastic model that he will assemble and paint. Keiko tells Ryuji that 100 dungeons have already been discovered in Japan and asks if he's been watching TV. Ryuji greets Keiko and asks what kind of hairstyle she has. The girl says Ki thinks she looks cuter this way and asks if he's talking about her hair. Ryuji Furuya calls her Ki. The girl says that these are just rumors, but they say that the local dungeon was overrun with monsters, and they came out, and the government quickly mobilized self-defense forces and cleared the dungeon in the shortest possible time. But there were many casualties among both the military and civilians. The girl says that perhaps one of the ancient civilizations was destroyed after the dungeons, and the monsters that emerged from them appeared. Ryuji Furuya asks where this information came from. The girl says it was written in the Mumu Monthly, but he says it's not the most reliable source. He greets Keiko, and the girl replies, "Kai," and says, "Good morning." Ryuji Furuya says it's morning, and the girl asks if he was expecting her. Ryuji Furuya tells her he's a level 1 hunter named Ito. He says the girl's hair is so cute. The girl thanks him. He offers to go, the girl agrees, and says she'll see him. Ryuji Furuya thinks he might be in love with Kayeko, but he also thinks it can't be true. Kayeko asks Kaie what's wrong with him. Kai addresses Kayeko by name. The girl says that this can't be true and asks if this is really true. He remains silent. Ryuji Furuya thinks this might be how fathers feel when their daughters introduce them to their boyfriends. He says that it is clear to him that Keiko is like a member of the family and he is worried about her. Now that he understands the reason, he feels much better. The sound of bells ringing can be heard in the background. A man reports another victim of false information about dungeon capturing tactics and asks Ryuji Furuya if he's seen the news. Ryuji Furuya says he's serious and that such cases have been increasing lately. The man explains that the victim was lucky. He says it's unclear why people fall for these false strategies, calling it a mystery. The man reports that only the most naive fall for this scam. The man reports that Mitsuhashi and Ito have been found to have adventurer's marks, and that they might also want to explore dungeons based on the strategies in the video, and if so, they're screwed. Ryuji Furuya tells Keiko he's going to the restroom, then says he'll tell the teacher and asks her to take her time. Keiko says she understands. Ryuji Furuya calls Keiko by name and says, "Okay." The image has no text or characters, only a men's restroom sign. Ryuji Furuya says he was also curious about these videos, so he watched them, but none of them were true. He explains that it's hard to say who uploads these videos has any specific motivation, and wonders why they would lie. In any case, something needs to be done about this, the man says, and the man calls it a storage. Ryuji Furuya reports that it is. The next panel shows a foot stepping on the floor. He says he can't understand why he's here. He explains that he didn't intend to come here. Ryuji Furuya says that even though they are one and the same, he's glad the other guy is okay. The man says, "Uh-huh." The words "dummy" appear between them. He explains that the tool that absorbs enemy attacks is similar to him, making them practically indistinguishable. He explains that it's a consumable item that lasts for 1 day and it requires a lot of resources, so he rarely used it in the other world, but yesterday he made it for the first time in a long time. Ryuji F. Mishri. Ryuji Furuya says he'll be back at the end of class and pick up his interlocutor, counting on him. The interlocutor replies, "Yeah." The next scene features the word teleportation. The image does not contain any text or speech from the characters, only a house is depicted. Ryuji Furuya confirms that the ticket is booked and the seat is selected, then informs that payment is being made online. He says mom and dad, standing in front of their photographs. Ryuji Furuya says he will have to use the money for more than just living expenses and asks for forgiveness. He says that it's great, it seems like he took everything, and says that he can go, then explains that he almost forgot an important thing. The top right corner indicates teleportation, and below it, it says Haneda Airport. The bottom right corner indicates invisibility is disabled. Ryuji Furuya explains that he walked his father to this airport. The man says he thought there was no one there but him, and asks what. He says that teleportation and invisibility are really very handy skills. Ryuji Furuya says it's his first flight and his heart is pounding. He then says it's his first security check and asks what they do if the gates ring. He says that if you think about it, the money that his uncle stole should have been used, and that he is not a champion of justice after all. Ryuji Furuya informs him that his place should be here. Ryuji Furuya explains that he's going through the turnstile at gate number 10. He says that flying without magic is simply amazing. Kochi Airport and a bus are shown in the background. Ryuji Furuya announces that he can now get here via teleportation. He says that's excellent. The text explains that teleportation can only take a person to a place they've already been to. The man says there's a whisper there, and repeats it again. The man explains that this is the Katsugahama dungeon, where documents are being accepted, government purchases are being made, and entry is prohibited. Ryuji Furuya reports that he didn't think there were so many people here. The guy suggests going down to the second floor today and says he's tired of slimes. The girl says she's been researching strategies online. The man asks if this is normal and speculates that the guy is one of those who believes in such things. Ryuji Furuya reports that there's no one nearby. He explains that the dungeon matches the one he went through in the other world, as he thought, and records the discovery. He reports that it's a homemade golem drone with a highly sensitive camera built into it. He explains that it's a vault. The woman explains that electronics aren't allowed in the dungeon, so she repurposed the chamber using magic. She explains that learning the basics of magical engineering as part of her hero training proved useful. Ryuji Furuya says he thought that if the drones could be easily modified, they could be mass-produced, but they require rare metals and ingredients to create, so he's only made 4 so far. He states that it will be a problem if they are seen by other adventurers, and explains that invisibility costs his MP, but once he's above level 1400, the cost is practically unnoticeable. Ryuji Furuya announces that everything is ready and will start filming from the place where he went down into the dungeon. Then he says that he almost forgot the most important thing. The image does not contain text or characters, only the school building. The man says Furuya seems a bit different today. Ryuji Furuya asks if it's true. The man explains that somehow Ryuji Furuya is slightly different from his usual self. Ryuji Furuya says, Ryuji explains that he's a dummy created through high-level magical engineering. The man says that Ryuji is good old Furuya and says it's a great relief. Ryuji Furuya says it looks cool, and next to it is a sign that this is the Katsurahama dungeon, the entrance to the first floor. Ryuji Furuya closes his eyes and raises his hands to his head. He puts on a helmet. He says he's hoarse and coughing. A recording appears on the screen about a drone in stealth mode. Ryuji Furuya welcomes everyone to the Dungeon Exploration channel and asks for a repeat, noting that his speech is too halting. He then announces that today they will map the first and second floors of the Katsurahama dungeon, admitting that fighting the Demon King was less nerve-wracking. He announces that in the next video, they'll develop strategies for fighting monsters, and suggests they all work together to figure out how to fight different types of monsters. He explains that the more he tries to control himself, the more he stutters, and then exclaims, "What's going on?" Ryuji Furuya says he'll leave a link to the PDF file below the video, and explains that future videos will have similar notes, reminding people to check the description. The top right indicates that an hour has passed. He announces that he's finally finished, and it took him about 30 takes just for the opening sequence. Then he says, "Phew." The man with the shield asks everyone to keep their eyes open, and the girl asks, "What's that over there?" Ryuji Furuya reports that there's excellent hunting grounds right next to the entrance, and right now, 3 groups of adventurers are already fighting slimes. Ryuji Furuya says they're currently on the first floor and suggests they explore it. The masked character explains that the more adventurers in the party, the less personal income, but you can always count on the support of your comrades, and that in the next world money will not be needed, so you should always prioritize your own safety. He says that he is gradually beginning to get used to it, and the man recommends hunting near this passage and warns them to be careful, as two slimes will be waiting for them along the way. He explains that there's a treasure chest in a small room that's easy to miss, so he advises them to look inside if they pass by. The man suggests opening the chest, and the woman tells you there's a potion inside and explains that the scout is a rare item, usually found in purple chests. The man explains that a new chest will appear in that location in 24 hours, so be patient, and warns that stepping on the slab will activate a trap. The man explains that everything feels different in the helmet, causing him to fall into a trap that they usually avoid and that he would never normally step on. And he also says that he did it to make it easier for them to understand. The guy says that they have walked around the entire first floor and it is time to go down to the second. But the stairs in the dungeon are steep and narrow, so you need to be careful when going down. Ryuji Furuya informs you that goblins, slightly stronger than slimes, live on the second floor, and if you don't have an adventurer's mark, there's a good chance they'll kill you, so it's best not to go down. A man screams and falls down the stairs. He says the stairs are dangerous and that even though he fell, they should still be careful. The girl screams for help, running away from the creatures chasing her. He casts a double fireball spell. The fireballs fly. Ryuji Furuya asks if the girl is okay. The girl thanks Ryuji Furuya and calls him a beautiful sister, then tells him that her friend has been captured by goblins. Ryuji Furuya says he will save her and her friends, but he notices the discovery and asks if they are still alive. The girl says it happened so fast and asks what happened. Ryuji Furuya announces his arrival. A man, bound with ropes and surrounded by goblins, says thank goodness and begs for help. One of the goblins makes a sound of surprise. The man says he doesn't understand what's happening. Ryuji Furuya says that her friend was a man, and an old man at that. A guy invites Keiko to explore dungeons together after graduation, and she calls it a wild imagination. He says it's a fireball. The armored man says it's none of his business and names the dungeon couple. The armored man releases fire. The guy yells, "Ha-ha," pointing his hand at a powerful energy blast that destroys the wall and causes clouds of smoke and flames. Ryuji Furuya says yes, then reports that there is trouble. The character reports that he hasn't been mistaken about the spell's power for 10 years, then records the discovery and explains that, thank God, he didn't hit any adventurers. The man thanks her for saving him and says he's never seen such destructive potential before, asking what kind of magic it was. Ryuji Furuya explains that it's a powerful version of a fireball and thinks it could be called a fire cannon. The man says that he certainly asked for help, but isn't that too much? He expresses bewilderment. The man understands that he wants to practice powerful magic, but asks what they would do if the ceiling collapsed and demands that he untie it quickly. The girl explains that it didn't hit anyone and the place will be completely restored by tomorrow, and then says that it sounds. The woman shouts Ken, the man shouts Yoko, the masked man remains silent. Ryuji Furuya explains that they're too low level for the second floor and should level up on the slimes from the first floor first, warning that without him, they'd already be dead. The man angrily tells Ryuji to shut up, explaining that they were simply letting their guard down a bit. A man says that sometimes problematic guys show up here and asks if he's right. He says to just ignore them. The man explains that at this rate, he'll have to constantly keep an eye on them and wonders if they'll stay on the second floor. Ryuji Furuya says he should warn them. Ryuji Furuya thinks it's possible that these two are there. The armored man explains that he won't be able to create a map like that and that it's time to retreat, using invisibility and stealth. The woman explains that in the dungeon, he's primarily responsible. The door states that the dungeon is the property of the Japanese government and entry is prohibited to outsiders. He says that it will be useful here and utters the word teleport. The girl says there's still time before classes end. Ryuji Furuya says that tomorrow they need to conquer the second floor and find a place to film the dungeon. He says that based on his current experience, he can easily complete 1 dungeon per weekday and 2 on weekends, which comes to 40 dungeons per month. He reports that in 3 months, he will be able to film footage of the first and second floors of all the dungeons in Japan, and he's lucky. Ryuji Furuya says the problem is in the editing and explains that the fastest way would be to cut the video, combine the necessary pieces, and add subtitles. He says his favorite voice actress has released a new video and that he should check it out. He explains that he wants to make a stylish video and needs to look for tutorials. The sound of bells can be heard from the school. A girl reports that the classroom is noisy. A man asks Ryuji Furuya what he's having for lunch, and Ryuji Furuya says he's not hungry. He says, "Let's eat together then." He'll share his lunch, which includes yakisoba bread and a bean paste bun. The man says he's a nice guy with glasses and reminds her that his name is Yamada. Ryuji Furuya thanks Yamada and says he will remember until his dying day how Yamada shared a bun with him. The man says Ryuji is exaggerating and explains that they're not just friends, but rather soulmates. Ryuji remains silent, lowering his head and covering his face with his hand. Ryuji Furuya asks what's wrong with the girl, and she says she has something in her eye. The girl screams for help and asks Ken not to come near, begging him to help her. Two goblins make noise, and one of the men orders them to take their hands off Yoko. The guy says he's not watching. Ken speaks with difficulty. The girl screams that they're freaks and refuses. Then they show hands that freeze. The man says that while the freeze is in effect, the goblins won't move, and asks them to take advantage of the moment to escape to the first floor. He explains that he was curious, and so he came. The man says they are saved and asks to untie the rope. The girl talks about a mysterious mask. Ryuji Furuya reports that it's a wind slash. The girl thanks the mysterious mask. The man says thank God Yoko is safe, and the girl screams, Ken. The man thanks Ryuji Furuya for helping them out a second time and apologizes for ignoring his advice the other day, while the girl says that if it weren't for Ryuji Furuya, they wouldn't exist. Ryuji Furuya explains that he helped them out of his own free will and gratitude. The man says it's all because of the video conquering the second floor at low levels, and that it was a paid subscription. The girl says it kept saying things like, I really don't want to tell you about this, only a select few know about this, and so on, but it seems like all of that was. Ryuji Furuya is silent. He says that this is his faithful servant. Ryuji Furuya announces that Proto One's ascent has begun. He says that he has installed a magical device in his interlocutor that makes him lighter in weight, so he can't make any sudden movements, and says that it worked perfectly, then asks if he understood him. Ryuji Furuya screams that it hurts when a robot suddenly hits him in the face with a jet of water. He says that if it were someone else in his place, he would have smashed his head in and asks why he stood up so abruptly. Ryuji Furuya says he thought this was a normal custom and asks who taught the robot this. The robot explains that it said it made Ryuji lighter and says his body feels so light. Ryuji Furuya admits it was him. Ryuji tells the robot not to turn off the device, or it will break through the floor, and asks if he understands. The robot replies no and says it will break through the floor right now. Ryuji Furuya explains that he defeated the Demon King and returned to his original world, and now they are in the world he came from. He explains that dungeons from another world have begun to appear here, and the world's resources have been depleted, so they have to go underground to get more. He reports that he cannot understand what kind of creature it is. Ryuji Furuya says he wants to record his own video with accurate information and nip lies in the bud, because if civilization degrades, he won't be able to watch anime in peace. The woman asks what her job is, and says that she needs to help hunt monsters in the dungeons. Ryuji Furuya says he wants help editing the video, and announces that he will never take anyone with him into the dungeon. The robot asks if it's because he's useless in the dungeon. He says that on the upper levels, the robot is an excellent assistant. Ryuji Furuya explains that this doesn't mean he'll take the person with him, and if anyone sees him, there won't be any problems because no one in this world knows about golems yet. The robot reacts with surprise. He says he won't take the robot with him, even if it makes a sad face, and explains that it would be sad if it were broken by mistake. The robot remains silent. Ryuji Furuya announces that he's edited the first video and suggests using it as a template for future videos. The robot says it's listening and asks how to edit the video. He suggests trying an internet search and explains that this is how he learned to use a computer, promising to teach his interlocutor how to do the same. The man says that a computer is a kind of golem, specializing in collecting information. Ryuji Furuya explains that it's the mouse and keyboard, and that's what you need to learn to use. He warns him never to open the OTKR folder again and asks if Ryuji understands. Ryuji says he does, and then says things are bad, and then again, the sound of the power-on signal indicates the rise of Prototype 1. Ryuji Furuya says the robot can't be ordinary because it doesn't look like a toy. The robot claims to be a helper and is ready to obey any commands. Ryuji Furuya explains that first, they need to check whether the robot can truly help. He reports that he experienced a random shutdown and is temporarily offline. The robot explains that he temporarily shut it down. He explains that he used teleportation to buy a laptop in Akihabara, and all the files have already been transferred there. Ryuji Furuya reports that the OTKR folder has disappeared, and it contained many images of beauties with different skin tones, and then says that he forgot to erase the memory. Ryuji announces that he's going to film a dungeon in Ueno Park and asks to review and edit the existing video, but warns that his memory has been erased. The robot responds that he understands. Ryuji asks if there are any questions. The robot reports that the master wanted to meet his family and asks if he was able to. Ryuji Furuya remains silent. He says it worked, and the robot says it's good. Ryuji Furuya says Prototype 1 looks a little sad and suggests they don't bring it up. Prototype 1 says it's listening. The right column states that this is the Ueno Park dungeon, where most adventurers go. The left column states that, compared to the dungeons that have appeared in this world, the Ueno Park dungeon can be considered the largest. He explains that. Ryuji Furuya announces that he's completely gotten used to the helmet and that he might be able to film a more important video today. He orders the insects to perform a 6-shot wind slash and declares it ready. Ryuji explains that if they hit too hard, they'll just break the monster, which isn't true. The man reports that the problem has been sorted out, and now all that remains is to record an explanatory video and make a map. Ryuji Furuya reveals that Proto 1 is his first golem, created in another world. He explains that usually, after mastering their skills, craftsmen destroy old golems and begin creating new ones. Ryuji Furuya explains that he spent all his free time improving Proto 1. He reports that his improvements have made the robot more humane and explains that the robot is so versatile that he can trust it with most of his chores. Ryuji Furuya explains that in another world, Proto 1 was responsible for all household chores, and they've been together for so long that he's long since grown attached to him. He explains that, in a sense, Proto 1 has become his comrade, if not a family member. He reveals that he awakened Pro 1 in this world to help him edit the video. Ryuji Furuya tells him that it's not just that, he brought him into this world so that he wouldn't be alone. Ryuji Furuya tells me. He reports that he is back. Ryuji Furuya asks how the editing is going. The robot reports that 18 videos are ready and asks him to check them all. He says it takes about 15 minutes to process one video and asks how long it took the other person. He says it took him 4.5 hours, although at double speed it would take just over 2 hours. He's surprised that it's 18 hours, and Ryuji Furuya says she doesn't understand why there are so many bad takes. She explains that she did it intentionally and, according to her research, it helps connect with the audience by humanizing the character. He says everything is fine as is, and asks to just leave out all the moments where he looks cool. The robot says he understands and asks if it's cool. Ryuji Furuya says Proto 1 is a lot more fun and asks people not to act like he's not cool. Against the backdrop of houses, it's announced that it's February, and today is the day of the entrance exams to the Adventurer School. A woman tells Ryuji Furuya that if he's after Kaiko, she's already gone. He tells her. Ryuji Furuya says that's how it is, and then asks A. The woman says she thought they agreed to go together and asks if Ryuji and Kaiko had a fight, remarking that he's so sweet. The woman wishes Ryuji a safe journey and good luck on his exam. The location is listed below, Tokyo, Ueno. The exam venue. Ryuji Furuya is taking the exam. He says that at first he wasn't very keen on joining the Adventurer School, but when he found out that the school allowed him to skip classes to go dungeon diving, he became more motivated to take these exams seriously and pass them. After Ryuji's exam, Furuya tells Keiko to stop hanging out with Furuya, explaining that she won't be able to refuse him if he asks to join their party. Keiko asks why. He says that he doesn't have a profession, so he won't be able to contribute anything to the party, and besides, if he's with them, they'll never be able to compare to the other parties. He explains that they're already risking their lives, and he doesn't want Furuya to get involved. The girl tells him that Ryuji is a nice guy, but it's too risky, and admits he's right. Ryuji explains that as his level increases, his hearing also improves, and he can even hear the girl's whispers. The man remains silent. The woman says they're already discriminating against people based on their profession, and Ryuji Furuya asks if she'll be going home later, to which the woman answers yes. Ryuji Furuya explains that the two have never been underground before. He says that his level and lack of profession are a simple mistake, but he is too lazy to explain it. The girl says it's Ryuji, and Ryuji answers with a question. Ryuji Furuya announces he's back and asks how the exam went. Keiko says he's sorry. A man in the background calls Keiko by name. Ryuji says all the misunderstandings will be cleared up soon. The girl says she'll go explore the school with Kai and see Ryuji again. Kai agrees. The man remains silent. A girl and Ryuji Furuya hold hands and look at each other. He says he wants to find a convenient place to teleport and that he should also take a look around and go home. The caption says it's March and the graduation ceremony is taking place. He watches with tears in his eyes. The man says that they will remain friends forever. Furuya agrees. It is reported that it is illegal to enter the dungeon until after high school, and for the same reason, many will rush there right after graduation. Ryuji Furuya tells Keiko that she will go into the dungeon with Ki, there is no doubt about that, and explains that he does not want his best friend to die because of false information. It is reported that despite the graduation ceremony, they will officially remain high school students until March 31. It is noted that there are 15 seconds left until the ban is lifted. Upper right, the sign says it's late March and identifies the location, the Ueno Park dungeon. Lower right, a group of men argue over the loot, one of them saying it's theirs and demanding they leave it alone, while the other explains that the loot belongs to whoever spotted it first, and the man tells Kunimi that the hunting grounds are overcrowded, and Kunimi says that they won't make a penny this way. The guy suggests leaving and coming back at another time. The man asks what they should do. The guy reports that now the dungeons are frequented not only by laid-off employees like themselves or those who quit without permission, but also by young people who can't find work due to the labor shortage. The man says that it's possible to kill a slime even without an adventurer's mark, and the earnings will be higher. A man says that with such an influx, they won't be able to earn as much as before, and another man asks if there are any good properties in the depths of the floors. Ryuji Furuya says it would be great to have reliable information about the dungeons, but right now, there's only false information floating around the internet, and many people believe these fakes, causing them trauma. The man says that many of them never return from the dungeons. The girl asks if this passage is what they're talking about. The woman tells Seira that there is a slime behind her. The woman screams that it won't work and asks Tyra to save her, apologizing to her. Tyra screams in fear. On the computer screen, a man says, "Taisk." In the comments, Tyra says this is no longer a joke, accuses Seira of being responsible for her death, and writes that she has filed a report. The girl reports that the negative comments have been increasing lately. Ryuji Furuya says they irritate him and he deletes them all. With the central police station in the background, a man shouts that because of people like his interlocutor in their videos, people are dying in droves and asks what he was thinking. He asks him not to shout like that. Ryuji Furuya says he's really not to blame for this, and that it's stated everywhere that the information he receives is used at his own risk. He says the detective should ask him, the lawyer, all questions first. The man states that the interlocutor must have evidence of his client's guilt in disseminating false information, and demands to compare the video with the actual layout of the dungeon before drawing conclusions, warning of a lawsuit for defamation if the lawlessness continues. The man remains silent, and then says that if he only had a video with footage of the dungeon. It is reported that if they get video of the inside of the dungeon, it will be a gold mine, and that even the smallest piece of footage will do. The guy explains that electronics don't work inside the dungeons, and the man asks if he's trying to disobey his superiors. The man says it's the other person's job, and they're the ones who have to solve the problem, and without the video, the contract won't be renewed. The man explains that this is complete nonsense, and someone simply found a pretext to terminate the contract. In such a hopeless situation, there's only one solution. The man says he hopes this will make them rich, and says they'll sell the footage to the studio that offers the highest price. Ryuji Furuya explains that they'll end up broke one way or another, and asks if the man thinks this is too shady a method. A man asks if the camera is working. He reports that it's not working, and expresses surprise that it's a NASA-designed dungeon camera. The text states that the action takes place on the first floor of the Ueno Park dungeon. The time outside is 12:00 a.m. on April 1st. The man reports what his boss said and asks how much he paid for the camera. The boss explains it cost 1,000,000 yen and he even took out a loan. The man says things are bad and he hasn't even received his severance pay, and the boss offers to sell the camera. Ryuji Furuya says they posted over 100 videos with a single press of the enter key. The man says that's not entirely true. He says he's excited about the event itself and asks what it means that they were posted in advance. The robot reports that he installed the scheduler program in METLV, and the videos were posted without any intervention. The Dungeon Exploration channel welcomes viewers. Ryuji Furuya says this is the true beginning of his channel. The man tells his boss things are bad and asks to see footage from the dungeon. The man says it's real and he doesn't see any signs of CG. He says it's definitely not fake and asks how he did it. The man offers to borrow the guy's equipment from his boss, but warns him that he won't be able to return it. Ryuji Furuya says he's been thinking about it for a long time and calls the man an optimist. The man reveals that Mr. Yama was sent a video straight from the dungeon. He says it all looks plausible and invites them to see it for themselves. The man asks why he knows it's not another fake, and then the man expresses surprise. The man says they need to be on the safe side and print out 50 frames from the video. Ryuji Furuya confirms this and explains that a map of the first floor of the Ueno Park dungeon will be in the description. The man says it's a shot right at the entrance and suggests going there and comparing everything. In the crowd, the man says he needs to see it urgently and asks if the other person has looked yet. He says it's a real dungeon and they need to meet to discuss everything, and also sends the address. A woman reports that there's a nationwide network outage and it's breaking news. Several people are discussing the situation in the chat room. One asks if it's real, another says they don't see any CG, and a third says it's serious. Ryuji Furuya reports that the number of views and subscribers is growing by leaps and bounds and says it's amazing. He says it's all thanks to his keen editorial instincts, and the robot explains that there's no need for thanks. He says it's true and thanks him, and the robot says it knows which spots to press and can't help itself, he tells. Ryuji Furuya says the network is overloaded and expresses serious confusion, as this is his Maytube debut. The next panel states that the action takes place at the White House on March 31st at 12:00 p.m., April 1st at 1:00 a.m. in Japan. A man reports that there is a massive blackout across America, while another man explains that neither the internet nor the phone are working. A man says they suspect a cyber attack by another country and asks if the other person knows which country is responsible. The man explains that this might sound crazy. The other man expresses confusion. The woman reports that the channel on METIV is primarily accessible worldwide. The man explains that, according to NASA's spyware, most phone conversations and emails are about this channel. Ryuji Furuya says he should believe he's the cause of the glitches and asks who owns the channel. The man says the account is Japanese and explains it's a dungeon exploration channel. The screen prompts people to like and subscribe. He says that today they will learn all the intricacies of fighting slimes. Linda says she doesn't know how he did it, but the video is completely real, and she's even curious about his skill level. The man thanks Linda, and she replies, "You're always welcome." The man reports that they requested the man's location data from a video service. The account and speech in the video are Japanese, but they shouldn't reveal their hand or report the discovery to the Japanese government. The girl tells her grandfather that after lunch she'll be heading underground in the Rocky Mountains and asks him to prepare a camera so that the man says he wants equipment capable of operating inside the dungeon to be found and wonders whether it's worth filming dungeon capturing techniques. He says these videos could be a potential advantage in negotiations. The man explains that from that day on, a global race will begin and they need to be faster than other countries. The image states that the action takes place in Japan. The guy says he's lost again and forbids Proto 1 from using any items in his inventory. Proto 1 says he understands and ignores the order, telling him to use whatever he wants. Ryuji Furuya says he's listening. He asks if it's Kojima, the accountant. Then Ryuji Furuya announces that they've finally responded and says she's already on her way, hoping he'll agree to meet her at a family restaurant near the train station. He says it concerns his project and will be ready soon. He also says he's surprised they're calling him so late. Ryuji Furuya reveals that he opened the company, Project Furuya, with his future in mind, and that Kojima is his tax accountant, whom he hired at the time. He explains that he's currently editing and wishes him a good journey. On Ryuji Furuya's orders, a skilled professional capable of keeping secrets was found, and he informs them that his demands are high, but he also pays well. He enters the room and says, "Welcome." The woman addresses Ryuji Furuya and apologizes for the delay. Ryuji Furuya says it's okay, he just arrived. The woman says she's offering to sit somewhere quiet and explains that it seems the girl was in a hurry. The woman apologizes for calling the man in the middle of the night and asks if he wants a snack, to which the man replies that he doesn't need one. The woman asks for a drink at the bar and the officer. The woman says she'll have a coffee. Ryuji Furuya asks what he'll have, and the guy replies he'll have a cola. The woman reports that the device is working properly. He says that it works quickly. Ryuji Furuya says that cold coffee and hot coffee are the same thing, just different temperatures. The woman reports that in 2 hours, the channel's subscriber count has surpassed 300 million, the highest number ever recorded on the internet, and the number continues to grow steadily. He says he can't believe it. The woman says she'd like to clarify a few details first and apologizes for asking if the videos are real. Ryuji Furuya says yes and wants to know if he's doing anything illegal. The woman says he should accept her congratulations. The girl asks if other adventurers are capable of filming similar videos, and he says that it is simply impossible. Ryuji Furuya reveals that he used special materials to remake a normal digital camera, and that obtaining them requires a massive level of around 900. He explains that even if someone were to obtain them, they would need to study magical engineering to know how and where to use them, and that all said. The woman says that she understands everything and can say that they have a complete advantage over all possible competitors. The woman reports that all the conditions for monetization have already been met, and the request will take about a week to be processed, with rough estimates suggesting revenue from the video could reach several billion. Ryuji Furuya says Motive just sent him a monetization notification, and it happened quickly. He says that when talking about monetization, they wrote to him that they would provide additional incentive bonuses if he agreed to upload videos exclusively on their platform. Ryuji Furuya says that if there were no plans to take over other platforms, he would recommend signing an exclusivity contract, and then Motive would take care of catching the pirates distributing the videos. Ryuji Furuya says pirated copies are entirely possible, but he will sign the contract. The woman says it's the big leagues and gives the number 40. Ryuji Furuya asks if this is a high school. The woman explains that the Furuya project has only recently launched and, at this rate, sales aren't expected to be the best. She's therefore considering hiring a lawyer and a financial manager for the company and asks what Mr. Furuya will say. He says that Kojima can act as he sees fit. The woman says she has connections with companies working in these areas and could outsource some of the work to them. Ryuji Furuya says it's quick again and agrees. The woman says, okay. He says they charge quite a lot for their work, but with projected sales, Furuya's project can easily afford it. There won't be any problems. For them, it's like a stone in the ocean. He also says he can assure you that these companies will honestly admit their mistakes if anything happens. The woman says that the contracts with them will be signed tomorrow and asks if the interlocutor has any questions. Ryuji Furuya asks her if she likes cats and clarifies that he's talking about the shirt. The woman explains that she was in her pajamas the whole time and apologizes, admitting that she likes cats even though she doesn't have any at home. Ryuji Furuya remarks that she's clumsy. He says that there is no difference and asks for forgiveness for the question, and also says that it seems she was in a hurry. The woman says she's in charge of finances and will cover all expenses, so there's no need to be shy. Ryuji Furuya thanks him for the treat. The woman apologizes to Ryuji Furuya for her invitation and asks him to forgive her. Ryuji Furuya says it's quick again. A woman says she allowed a minor to walk alone in the middle of the night and admits it was an unacceptable mistake on her part. The woman says she'll take him home, and Ryuji Furuya says he lives nearby and everything's fine, but the woman explains that doesn't work that way. Ryuji Furuya says his home is there and suggests they go, and the woman calls him clumsy. A woman asks Ryuji Furuya if he plans to continue uploading dungeon crawl videos in the future, to which he replies, yes. He explains that adventurers who can wisely gather and manage their resources sound like a great idea. The woman says it's a good idea and sincerely wishes him luck. She explains that the whole world has been waiting for this knowledge, and no one could have imagined that a 15-year-old boy possessed it. Ryuji Furuya says that this is not the case, and explains that he could not have done it intentionally. The woman tells him that if he has any problems in the future, he can confidently contact her and she will help in any way she can. He thanks her and notes that she is a good person. Furuya reveals his name. A woman says goodnight to Ryuji Furuya, and Ryuji Furuya says goodnight and comments on the woman's professional moves. He says he was worried the woman would be left alone on the street at night, so he used his invisibility and stood next to Kojima until her taxi arrived. It is reported that this happened about a year before Ryuji Furuya defeated the Demon King, and that it was the first battle between the multinational human army and the demon army. In this battle, the fate of all humanity will be decided, and he says that we must forget about the strife between countries and all together raise our blades against the armies of demons. Ryuji Furuya says he's nervous because this is his first fight outside of a dungeon and sighs. The woman says she and the soldiers will cover Ryuji's rear and he should focus all his attention on the enemies in front of him. Ryuji asks if he can't fight alongside them. Ryuji explains that this is his fight. The girl announces that everything has already been decided and warns that if they make even the slightest mistake, everything will be ruined because today is your debut as a hero. In the next scene, a man with a sword fights a huge monster using magic circles and attacking the enemy. Ryuji Furuya reports that the detachment from the neighboring country is moving too slowly, and it would be a disaster if their speed encircled the troops. He tells them to follow the hero. He reports that he dealt with the main enemy forces in about half a day, and that humanity, having gained strength, put the demon army to flight. He explains that April 2nd is the second day since the debut on Matube. The man says morning. Ryuji Furuya asks what's going on and notices that there are a lot of comments expressing gratitude and support. The robot informs them that the comment section is getting out of control and wants them to handle it themselves. The robot reports that the majority of laudatory comments come from abroad, while comments from Japanese users are half negative, most often writing that it's a fake, followed by that they tried the strategy and it worked, and in last place, that he must be a freak behind the mask. Ryuji Furuya says he wonders what they have here and asks if he is really being praised and where exactly. He says he can't believe it happened. He explains that he didn't expect such a turn of events. Ryuji Furuya says it's another fake. Everyone knows the camera can't be used in the dungeon. The CG is low quality, even a layman can recognize it, and only a psycho would crave attention like that, so someone needs to report it. He explains that you shouldn't watch it because the robot's head informs that there are also grateful comments and asks not to be sad. Ryuji Furuya says he's fine and expected something like this. The robot tells him that he should look at the little tsundere's comment and it will perk him up, to which Ryuji replies that he feels fine as is. The girl says that you shouldn't focus only on filming videos because they are not as important as he is, and that there is nothing good about it at all. Ryuji Furuya says she's an angel and tells him he should be praised more often. He reports that something similar happened in another world and says that the anonymous ads there were just terrible. Ryuji Furuya tells me not to reply to comments, but the robot says it will. Ryuji explains that when he first debuted as a hero, there was a battle between a multinational army and an army of demons. The woman says that thanks to Ryuji taking on the main forces, the allied army was able to achieve a crushing victory, and now the whole world knows him as a hero. The woman also says, Ryuji Furuya says he needs recognition and asks if defeating the Demon King is enough. The girl explains that there's a lot to be done, including gaining recognition, and says it's time for her to go to the council meeting. He says yes, and thinks that he's not sure he fully understands her, but the main thing is that Daenerys is happy. The man tells Princess Daenerys that she had endured a lot in this battle, and that Ryuji Furuya's success was astonishing. Princess Daenerys explains that this is all too strange, asks if the Demon King's army lost too quickly, and suggests that perhaps he. The woman says there's nothing strange about this. It's because of Ryuji's incredibly high level, which has different limits than theirs, and that, furthermore, she received the gift of summoning a hero from the goddess Luna Maria herself. She asks that Ryuji not be denigrated. The woman says she doesn't care if they're going to talk about her. The woman says they don't have any evidence yet, and that her tears are just fake. The man says he still finds it too strange, and another man explains that this is what women do, and adds that he believes her. Daenerys remained silent the entire way back to the kingdom, and when they finally returned, she locked herself in her room, and the plan to conquer the Demon King began to slow down. Ryuji Furuya tells Daenerys that he's finished with all the dungeons in her plan and asks if he can choose the next dungeon himself, adding that he doesn't understand anything. Daenerys doesn't object and says she needs to talk to her family and the nobles, otherwise a lot of problems will arise. The woman tells Ryuji that she apologizes for causing him problems. Ryuji asks if there are problems and clarifies that she means he hasn't understood anything lately. The woman smiles. The girl says she thought that if she puts in the effort to save the world, everyone will support her. But it seems that's not the case. Ryuji Furuya says he's serious and asks what happened. He remains silent. The girl says that nothing happened and explains that she herself doesn't know why she was sad. The woman says she loves this world too much and will continue to fight against the Demon King to the end, and asks Ryuji to try harder. Ryuji says he won't do anything here. Ryuji Furuya reports that he found out about everything a little later and explains that the princess brings back memories, reminiscent of something similar. The girl asks if Daenerys felt the same way back then as she does now, and he listens silently. Ryuji Furuya says he doesn't understand what they're talking about, and the girl asks if he's crazy. He says he's talking about the comments under the video. The robot says there are too many comments for him to control and suggests they deal with them themselves, asking if they want to leave things as is or close the comments section. Ryuji Furuya says that closing them will eliminate any further concerns. But on the other hand, that way he won't be able to see what his subscribers think. He then explains that there's no point in touching anything and understands the situation. He says that if they leave things as is, he won't have to put in any extra effort, but on the other hand, they'll have to constantly see negative comments. He asks why he needs to continue explaining. The robot says that the matter needs to be completed. Ryuji Furuya says and says that it's interesting. Proto 1 reports that truly awful comments are blocked by the platform itself as a security measure, then explains that everything is crystal clear and praises Proto 1 while warning not to touch the comments. The robot says it feels so refreshed. Ryuji Furuya says he's going to go film a video. The robot wishes him a safe trip and informs him that they're running out of footage, so they need to film as much as possible. The top right section states that the action takes place in the Ueno Park dungeon. The left section states that it's the 27th floor. Ryuji Furuya reveals that the 27th floor is a normal labyrinth and explains that the floor's main monsters are black scorpions. He says he forgot about his helmet and says he'll have to take it off again because it'll be a pain. Then he's silent. It is indicated that 3 days have passed since the debut on Metube. The date is April 3rd. Ryuji Furuya says he wonders if Keiko watched those videos, and the man says that Keiko is a childhood friend. Ryuji reports that they're being featured on TV, in newspapers, radio, magazines, and even on anonymous blogs. The Dungeon Exploration channel has become a hot topic everywhere. The robot explains that their videos are so popular that it would be strange if she hadn't watched them yet. The woman reports that about a year ago, underground caverns began to form around the world, and at the same time, the Earth's natural resources were sharply depleted. She explains that energy supplies also began to decline, and attempts were made to use nuclear and wind energy, but they were unable to meet the demands. Ryuji says it's begun. The woman reports that acute problems have emerged with logistics and the manufacturing industry. Furthermore, due to the depletion of natural resources, infrastructure development has come to a standstill. Many companies have gone bankrupt, leading to a deterioration in the economy. Some have begun to predict an inevitable decline. The woman says it was discovered that mana stones mined from monsters could be processed into fuel, which dramatically changed the situation, and that, what's more, all minerals could also be mined in dungeons. She declares that dungeon exploration has become humanity's new hope. Ryuji informs him that Iwaki Industries has made great strides in processing mana stones and would like to buy their shares. The robot says that shares are strange things, and if Ryuji is confident he won't end up in the red, he agrees, explaining that they received the money for the contract with. It's reported that defeating slimes on the first floor doesn't even require an adventurer's mark, so many have flocked to the dungeons to earn money. It's also explained that surviving on the second floor and below requires a mark and a high level. Modern weapons are reportedly practically useless against the monsters from the dungeons, and electrical devices don't work at all there, which has slowed down exploration, as exploration was practically impossible without modern technology. It's also said that the monsters themselves are powerful, leading to a large number of deaths. Ryuji Furuya says it's a long explanation. The robot says they don't talk about their channel at all. The woman informs them that they are about to interview a dungeon expert, Professor Shinohara. Professor Shinohara is shown on the left as a dungeon expert. Ryuji Furuya says he's a dungeon expert. Professor Shinohara reports that no one knows as much about the dungeons as he does, and they underestimate the danger of these places. He explains that, according to his assessment, even with the resources extracted from the dungeons, human civilization faces inevitable degradation, and we are only able to replace. It is reported that recently a video with correct strategies for exploring dungeons was posted on a major platform, and the source of the video is a channel called Dungeon Exploration, also known as KPI. Ryuji Furuya says that here it is. The woman reports that this channel already has all the information about the first floors of over 100 dungeons in Japan, including detailed information about monsters and accurate maps, and that this channel was the first to record a video inside a dungeon. She explains that they were able to interview K-Pip himself and is interested in. Ryuji Furuya says this is an interview. He says that he hasn't given an interview, and the man asks when he managed to give one. Mr. K-Pip says that he is the same K-Pip who couldn't sit by and watch the decline of humanity, so he decided to record this video. Ryuji Furuya says he doesn't understand who it is. The helmeted warrior explains that some cunning old man thought he was a dungeon expert, calling it ridiculous, and also says that the old man is most likely a fraud since he has a dirty face and has never been in. He says he agrees with this. The masked man says that only Clip is right and adds that he has more to say, after which he says goodbye. The woman explains that this was all an exclusive interview. Ryuji Furuya says this imposter's design is completely different and that he won't let it go, declaring there's no forgiveness for him. The robot reports that this imposter's helmet is just like Ryuji's. He says he wants to do something about the imposter. The woman says she can help with this issue, but first she should contact Muto's law firm, and since court costs are a deductible, the taxes are reduced. The woman says she'd like to thoroughly address this issue to prevent it from happening again, and asks for permission. Ryuji Furuya says he'll leave everything to her and that she can be relied upon. The woman explains that she doesn't seem like she's bragging and that she won't leave them any chance of something like that. Then, the woman says she's Clip's mother and apologizes for causing her son so much trouble. The man asks if she's Clip's mother. K-Pip's older brother apologizes for causing so many problems for the younger brothers and reveals that he is K-Pip's older brother. A man, K-Pip's former classmate, talks about his student life. The man reveals that there are other self-proclaimed relatives and friends and clarifies that Ryuji doesn't know any of them. Ryuji says he just revealed his true identity, so he has no idea who they are and confirms that he doesn't know them. The woman says that she will make sure that no one can imitate them, and that it will be necessary to organize a group that will address this issue from all sides. She speaks well. The woman tells Ryuji Furuya that she would like him to record a video officially filing a defamation lawsuit to put an end to those who are still thinking of profiting from him. Ryuji Furuya says he can always rely on Kojima, then agrees and says, the woman thanks him and apologizes for taking up his time. He says he should thank her and asks him not to worry. A woman asks if the filming of the research videos is going well, and Ryuji Furuya replies that yes, it is, and clarifies what exactly. The woman says she watches Ryuji Furuya's videos a lot, and he says it's very exciting. The woman reports that she has not developed the mark of an adventurer, and that watching the video makes her feel like one of them, which makes her incredibly happy. Ryuji Furuya says he can't believe this happened. The woman reports that everyone around her is also happy and says that Ryuji's videos are helping their adventurer friends. Ryuji thanks her. The woman says she's really looking forward to new videos. Ryuji Furuya is silent. The man says he's home. The woman says, welcome back. The robot reports that Ryuji Furuya looks pleased and asks if anything good happened. Ryuji Furuya replies that it might as well have been nothing. Then Ryuji Furuya smiles. He says he's going to film a video at Kojima's request. The man wishes him a safe journey. He explains that he wants to record the video in a place where no one is around, and notices that it seems like there are more people around. Ryuji Furuya says that there might not be many people in the depths and reports a discovery. He says there are plenty of people around even in the deepest hunting grounds, and asks if it's because of his video. The man expresses bewilderment. The guy explains to the girl that they only have 5 people out of 2, and asks about Ito. The girl tells him about Keiko. Ryuji Furuya explains about stealth and invisibility. The girl asks Kei if he's sure everything will be okay. Kei explains that they've been watching videos from a dungeon exploration channel and bought equipment from Iwaki. Kei explains that if anything bad happens, he'll protect Keiko. The girl calls him by name. Ryuji Furuya is silent, watching a boy and a girl holding hands and looking at each other lovingly. He says, "Oh my God," and reports that he saw something that doesn't fit with invisibility and stealth while asking Keiko and Ito for forgiveness. He then explains that they both have adventurer's marks and watched his video, so nothing serious will happen. The character plans to sue the imposters, pretending to be him and his acquaintances, and says that today will only be an announcement, and the next videos from the channel on dungeon exploration should be expected. Ryuji Furuya says he used bad takes again, and the man explains it's hilarious. A girl rings the doorbell outside her home. It's announced that it's the day she'll be entering adventure school. Ryuji Furuya says he's going, and wonders who it could be. Keiko greets Ryuji Furuya and suggests they check their results together, noting it's been a while since they've seen each other. Ryuji Furuya says fine, but asks why she's not with Kai. The girl says he cheated on her, so she dumped him. Ryuji Furuya says adventurers are so popular that even at the dungeon exit there are already many fans waiting for them. The girl replies, "That's right." Ryuji Furuya explains that he was so nice to her and expresses surprise. The girl asks Ryuji if he's been to the dungeon, and Ryuji says that he goes there every day, but only enters using invisibility. The girl asks if Ryuji Furuya has contacted his former classmates. Ryuji Furuya says he communicates with Yamada via line and would like to invite someone to meet. The girl says there's something strange about Ryuji and that he's not like the adventurers she knows. Ryuji asks, what's wrong? The girl says Ryuji Furuya doesn't have a profession. Ryuji Furuya says his profession isn't displayed and explains that it could be a simple bug. The girl says the main thing is not to get sad. He says he wasn't sad and asks not to cheer him up because he doesn't like it. The girl says she saw the new issue of Delta and really likes their handiwork. Ryuji Furuya says he's undecided between the print and digital editions. He says he's glad Keiko is doing well and that she hasn't changed. Ryuji Furuya. The woman and the cameraman say they're from a local channel and ask for a moment, clarifying that the people they're talking to are students at the adventurer school. The woman says they even approached them. The girl asks if they can tell her her level and job. She says she's a level 2 warrior. Ryuji Furuya asks what about him and explains that he reached level 1500 yesterday, which was a really difficult task. Even the Dark Dragon barely helped, and that his job is hero. A woman announces that today's program will feature a report on how children spend their summer vacation. A man with a camera explains that filming will begin with a visit to a summer camp. The woman says it's creepy, and the cameraman thanks her for her time. The woman says Ryuji is, as always, on point, and Ryuji says he was telling the truth. The woman explains that classes are assigned based on grades, with those with the highest scores being sent to Class A and those who did the worst being sent to Class E. Ryuji Furuya says that then he should be in Class A. He says that Class A, listing the names Ha, Hai, Fu, and Furuya, he says that he doesn't understand what's going on. Ryuji Furuya asks what it means that his name isn't in Class A. He reports that as his level increases, so does his intelligence. He prepared seriously for the exams, so he should be among the top passers. The man asks if there was some mistake. The girl tells Kei that this guy Ito got into Class A and it makes her so angry. Ryuji Furuya tells her that Ito is in serious trouble. The girl says she is in Class B, and he tells her it is a class lower than the liars and congratulates her on being one of the best classes. The girl reports that she doesn't see Ryuji's name on the list. Ryuji says he was supposed to be in Class A, but apparently they didn't include him due to a mistake, and he needs to go ask the staff room about it. The girl says she found him and says he's in Class E. Ryuji Furuya, says E. The girl says that she is showing something and calls Furuya Ryuji from Class E. Ryuji asks A. Ryuji Furuya says, Ryuji Furuya says he doesn't understand anything. He reveals that 10 years have passed since he was kidnapped and summoned to another world, and all these years he has been painting his life and fighting monsters as a hero. The hero is said to have defeated the Demon King, saved the entire world, and reached level 1500, but is still an E-class hero and considered one of the worst. Ryuji Furuya says that it's right, that's where it is, and that the E must stand for extra class, and also says that he has a good feeling about this E and it's amazing. The girl reports that Ryuji's class has the worst usual order, rows A, B, C, D, E. She says that Ryuji has turned pale and asks if he is okay. Ryuji Furuya asks if things are that bad and says he'll be going to his class. A sign with the inscription 1E is shown. The atmosphere in the classroom is oppressive. All the students have their heads down and are sitting, immersed in their thoughts. Ryuji Furuya says that most of them have already given up hope and hope that they will come to their senses a little later. Then he says that he doesn't understand how he got into E-class and sighs. Sato announces that she will be Class E's homeroom teacher and is pleased to meet them. She says that even though they are here, each of them remains a chosen person with the mark of an adventurer. The woman says that it is worth increasing the level and strength so that you can change classes at any time, explains that from now on they will often dive into the dungeon, and hopes that they will quickly get used to it. Ryuji Furuya announces that class changes are possible. He says that if he can prove his strength, he could be promoted to D-class, and with his abilities, even A-class is no problem. He says he doesn't know how to prove it. Ryuji Furuya's palm displays level 1. Ryuji Furuya reports that he has a bad feeling and that escaping from Class E may be impossible from the start. He informs them that before going into the dungeon, they must form a party, as surviving alone will be too difficult, and if one of them dies, they will lose their bonus. One of the students says the teacher is being too frank. The woman explains that when creating a party, it's important to consider a balance between professions. The man says he's a warrior, the girl explains she's a monk, the man explains he's a wizard, and the girl says she's a thief, suggesting a 4-person party. The guy asks Ryuji Furuya what his profession is, and Ryuji explains that he's always fought alone and has long wanted to try something like this. The man tells Ryuji not to stand there and turns to him, and Ryuji, surprised, replies that a man asks Ryuji Furuya what his profession is. Ryuji Furuya replies that he has none. The man asks if he understands, and Ryuji Furuya replies that he doesn't have a profession, like. The girl expresses surprise. The man reports that something unexpected happened. The guy says he doesn't have a profession and laughs. The other guys say they saw him cause a scene during the level test and ask how he got into the school. The woman asks the guys not to laugh and stop. The guy says the word unemployed several times in a row. Ryuji Furuya says he's unemployed and explains that just a moment ago they were all in despair, but as soon as they found a scapegoat, their moods changed. He explains that this is shocking and explains that teacher Sato isn't even trying to stop them. The woman says that Furuya is simply special and asks them not to laugh at him, explaining that his physical performance and test results were the best among everyone, and that he was placed in Class E solely by the decision of the principal and his deputy. He says that he already knew that he was the best on the test. The woman says she's unemployed and shaking. Ryuji Furuya says it's now clear why she was assigned to the E-class. A short-haired guy says Furuya really has no profession and that it's a joke, and another guy asks if he realizes how useless he is and advises him to quit school before he drags everyone down. He remains silent. The woman explains that this is too cruel. The man says that for 3 years, Ryuji Furuya will be called unemployed and bets that he'll chicken out and go to the dungeon. Ryuji Furuya says that with the teacher's permission, he'll go to the dungeon, the woman says. He says that with your permission, he will go into the dungeon and asks if that is okay. He also says that the girl did not hear him. The man says that no one will go underground with the unemployed man, and Ryuji Furuya says he will go alone. The man takes Ryuji Furuya's hand. The girl says the guy better finish this because she'd like it if he died. The man says he can only go alone. The guy laughs and the girl snorts. Ryuji Furuya says explaining things to them is a waste of time and that it was nice to meet them. The man says listening to him ramble is a waste of time. The girl asks the kids to stop and one of the students agrees while the others laugh. The guy asks what's wrong. The man explains that he brushed his hand away so easily even though he was holding it tightly. A guy announces he's a level 3 martial artist and orders another guy to shut up. The girl says it's funny and asks if he's weaker than an unemployed guy. Ryuji Furuya says this isn't how he imagined school life to be, and that's okay. The top right section says this is the Ueno Park dungeon. The top left section says it's good that the school is close to the dungeon. He's standing in front of the Ueno Dungeon Administration building, where a line has formed. The man reports that this is his first time going through the official procedure to visit the dungeon. The girl explains that to be allowed to leave during classes, she needs identification. Ryuji Furuya says these are lockers. He reports that they even have a changing room, although it is paid, and he thinks that the government will soon remove the fee in order to attract adventurers. Ryuji Furuya reports that the Adventurers Guild in the other world also offered similar services, and that it's nice to know they care about comfort. He says that there is no one, and that you can go directly to the 1000th floor using the dungeon core, which allows you to move freely throughout the entire dungeon. The top right indicates that this is the Dark Dragon and the boss of the Ueno Park dungeon. The bottom right shows the dragon flying forward at a rapid pace. The bottom left shows the dragon unleashing a powerful stream of fire towards a standing man. Ryuji Furuya reports that, after a sudden retreat, the dragon will most likely breathe fire. Ryuji Furuya states the times are WA1000 1005 and WA1000 2002 3023. The top right corner states that they are counter-attacking with a pre-prepared freezing spell. In the center right, the dragon roars and makes noises. In the center left, it plunges its sword into the ground. In the bottom right, the dragon is shown surrounded by clouds of smoke. The top right panel reports that the dragon was slain in 5:31 seconds, setting a new record. Ryuji Furuya calls it superb. The bottom panel shows a glowing book. He reports that a rare spellbook dropped from the book and asks if it's a level 2 drain. He explains that his level 1 drain is hardly useful since higher level monsters have resistance to it, and says that the second volume should have an improved one. The guy says he's home and the man says, "Welcome back." The robot announces that it's quite early today and asks if they're filming. Ryuji Furuya says he just defeated the dragon as usual and confirms this with a curt yes. He says that today they will finally start filming a video for Channel 2. The man explains that this is dungeon exploration cooking. The top right character says he's scared, and the left character says he's incredibly nervous. The man explains he'll turn on the camera on the count of 3, 2, 1, and Ryuji Furuya understands. The man announces that they've started. He counts to 3 and then shouts, asking if it can go faster. Ryuji Furuya tells you that after defeating a slime, you shouldn't forget to collect its slime, and explains that it has many uses, and today he will teach you how to make a potion from it. He says to stop filming and apologizes for getting too nervous, and the robot says that everything is fine. The man explains that the potion can drop randomly from any monster, so there's always a chance of getting one even at level 1, adding that such people have already been there. He adds that the potion is currently very expensive, so anyone who gets one is truly lucky. Ryuji Furuya reports that the potion can actually be crafted by hand, the main ingredient being medicinal moss that grows on the 26th floor, and slime is needed as a stabilizer, without which the potion will quickly spoil and is impractical during long forays. He explains that the slime acts as an excellent preservative, which preserves all the healing properties of the moss for a long time, and says that now you can start cooking. Ryuji Furuya announces that the potion is ready and offers to try it. He says that making the potion by hand isn't that hard, the main thing is practice, and adds that they'll see each other again. He reports that it turned out well, and he even feels like his skin has become smoother. He says that it's hard going. The robot reports that it turned out great and says that the shooting is over. Ryuji Furuya says that it's all over and asks if there will be any reshoots. He says that if they reshoot every frame he's unhappy with, they won't film anything, and asks them to remove the frames where he starts mumbling, promising to do so. The robot agrees. The next day, the man says, "Good morning." Ryuji Furuya says, "Good morning," and the robot announces that the second channel has already surpassed 3 million subscribers. Ryuji Furuya says it's amazing, almost like the main channel. He says they seem to be running low on medicinal moss and asks if that's true. The robot reports that the prices for slime and medicinal moss on the government procurement website are rising every minute. Ryuji Furuya says he has a large supply of moss, but selling it all at once will attract attention, so he suggests selling it in parts to make it less noticeable. The robot explains that selling potions cheap could save the lives of many adventurers. Ryuji F.M. He reports that after enrolling in the adventurer school, he was able to enter the dungeon at any time without any problems and took away a bunch of videos about how to safely navigate dungeons. Ryuji Furuya reports that today they are making dungeon potato croquettes. The number of views has already exceeded 1 billion. Hundreds of adventurers are writing him comments with gratitude, and he is pleased to be of use. It is reported that the second semester has begun at this pace. A girl says she saw a transfer student and calls her very beautiful. A guy asks if she's referring to the blonde. The woman explains that she's so beautiful, she looks like she's not from their planet. The man says there are only 3 such beauties in their school. Another man adds that she's... Ryuji Furuya says they definitely said a foreigner was transferring to them and that 3D girls are none of his business. He reports that at that moment the caption says that the action takes place a little earlier. The tablet shows an image of a boy. The man in the office says that Furuya Ryuji is just an ordinary, average high school student. The girl with the tablet says that he really is the owner of a dungeon exploration channel and doesn't look strong. The man says the same applies to Linda, and no one would have thought that such a sweet little angel like her could be the best adventurer in the United States, at level 34. Linda says that Grandpa shouldn't talk like that in public and expresses serious bewilderment. The girl asks why he keeps staring at the camera, and the man begins to answer. Ryuji Furuya looks around and back. The man says they were trying to film covertly, but he turns around every time they wanted to take a photo and explains that the best team was doing the surveillance, so he must have detection skills. He listens silently and gives a thumbs up. The man says he's obviously aware of the US surveillance, which is why the operation was shut down, but his reaction to the footage shows a courage not every schoolboy possesses. The girl says, puffed. The man tells Linda that he needs her opinion and asks what the chances are that he could be recruited by another nation to explore the dungeons. The girl explains that the military has no chance against Furuya. She saw him conquer the 100th floor of the Ueno Park dungeon, and it was simply breathtaking. She explains that to force him, an adventurer of a higher level is needed, and she doesn't know Furuya's level, but he's clearly above that level. The man says he wants him to join the American adventurers, and asks Linda if she can win his heart. Linda responds with a question. The man says it's in the national interest, of course, but there's more to it than that. He believes the girl's grandfather is the perfect candidate for her. His courage helped save the world from many losses. The girl remains silent. The girl tells her grandfather not to joke like that and reminds her that she's only 16 years old. Her grandfather says it's not a joke and that Ryuji Furuya is also 16. After these words, the girl thinks of only one thing. The girl calls Ryuji Furuya, explains that he seems like a simple guy, but in fact, he is the owner of the video, and says that he is the greatest adventurer and the dream of all adventurer girls. Ryuji tells Linda her name, Linda calls Ryuji by name, and Ryuji is surprised it's him. A man asks what's going on with the Japanese government, and another man says they haven't taken any action yet and are only considering the idea of introducing a special tax for streamers. The man explains that the government is awaiting the annual publication of financial results, and it's difficult to hide information from the Japanese tax service, so many details of the Furuya project's secrets will be revealed at that point. The girl remains silent. The man tells Ryuji Furuya that his peaceful life will last another couple of months at best. The guy yells at Furuya and asks how he ended up in E-class. Ryuji Furuya says that Class E is for the final round of selections and asks if the man he's talking to plans to enroll in Class B in the second semester, like him. The man says it's the guy who was hitting on him on the day of his entrance exam and exclaims, "Ryuji Furuya, I'm interested." The man says he understands it will be difficult for an unemployed person to get into a party, but he thinks sitting in an E-class is a waste of time. Ryuji Furuya tells him to go upstairs and says he'll be waiting in Class B. The man asks if it's a waste and what he's talking about. He says it's cool. He says he'd like to be like him. The girl says they saw what just happened and calls it creepy. The girl with long blonde hair says she'll wait and that it's not embarrassing to say such things. The girl explains she was embarrassed simply because she heard him speak and suggests that this is what Spanish shame is. The woman says that if a corpse remains in the dungeon for more than 24 hours, it will be consumed by the dungeon itself, and if one wanders the dungeon alone, one can die and be consumed, as there will be no one to carry the body away. She says that Furuya is alive. The girl screams. Ryuji Furuya angrily reports that teacher Sato is not changing. The girl says that she almost forgot and that he called Director Iwaki, ordering her to go to his office immediately. He asks what the director wants from him. The woman tells him to remember to tell him she's a wonderful teacher. Ryuji Furuya says he's not even listening, and you wouldn't know she's a wonderful teacher. He says that this is the director's office. He explains that someone left. The girl opens the door. The girl is silent. Ryuji Furuya is silent. The girl says she's looking right here. He says, The girl says she's not going to wait any longer. Ryuji Furuya says he's not going to wait either. The guy says he can't go to the club today because he has things to do. The girl says she understands and will wait for him. Ryuji Furuya says this girl is just like the main character of this season's popular anime, 9 Men. Ryuji knocks on the principal's office door. He notices the silence and asks who's there. Then Ryuji announces that he's entering and hears that it's Furuya from Class E. Ryuji Furuya says he can't afford to be weak because weakness means death. The man says he is a level 25 assassin and says it is impossible, but still. Ryuji Furuya reports that assassins are targeting him in this world as well, and at the same time asks if this could be the director. The guy says that Tanaka attacked Ryuji on his orders and asks him not to hold a grudge, and Ryuji tells the guy to forgive him. Ryuji Furuya asks who it is, and the man says his name is Iwaki. The woman tells the principal that she finds it hard to believe. He tells her that he is currently the principal of the school, explains that he is an engineer by education, and says that he is not cut out to be a principal. The man says that they called Ryuji Furuya specifically to check again and asks for forgiveness for this, and then explains that this is their job. A man informs the director about an inspection. Ryuji Furuya listens. He speaks precisely. The man explains that he is not good at beating around the bush, so he will ask directly. A man asks Ryuji Furuya if he is a former hero who returned from another world. Ryuji Furuya reacts with surprise. He asks where they got this from. The man replies that it's because he's like that. The girl says that it's right on target. Ryuji Furuya says it's not a lie and asks him to wait a bit. The man says he's a spy. Ryuji Furuya expresses surprise. He asks why he needs it now. The man with the camera explains that he needs to look through it at him and Tanaka. Ryuji Furuya puts on his glasses. The man says he only showed them to the principal. The man reports that he is level 1. Ryuji Furuya says this is level 1 and asks if you'll believe him. He says he can't believe it happened. The man says that he and his interlocutor were drawn into different worlds and explains that, unlike him, the interlocutor defeated the Demon King with his bare hands, while he simply helped the local hero with his knowledge of magical engineering. Ryuji Furuya explains that he uses the knowledge he's gained to create tools for adventurers, and that he founded this school. He suggests they sit down and talk about everything. The man stands while Ryuji Furuya sits on the couch, and the boy stands across from him. Ryuji announces that he's bringing back the scout and mentions the conversation about returning from other worlds. Ryuji asks where to begin. Ryuji explains that this is a dungeon exploration channel and asks if that's Furuya's work, noting that his guides are amazing. Furuya. The man asks how he managed to film that video and asks to see his camera next time. Ryuji Furuya asks to get to the main topic, reminding them that they had a plan, and the man addresses Ryuji Furuya, calling him the director. He says that he, like his interlocutor, has returned from another world and has questions for him. He says that he doesn't like it and apologizes for getting carried away. The man announces that random placement time will begin tomorrow and would like Ryuji Furuya's help in protecting the students. Ryuji Furuya declines. The text explains that random placement time is a period when, once a year, for a couple of days, the students move from the lower floors to the upper floors. You could simply avoid entering dungeons for a few days. But monsters aren't the only thing this phenomenon brings with it. The chance of getting rare loot and treasures also increases, for example, the same scout. The girl asks why the man refuses. The man explains that he has important things planned for that period that he can't refuse. The man with long hair and a beard stares ahead silently, while the woman with long dark hair expresses displeasure. The man says it's random placement time and reminds them that he's talked about how dangerous it is in his videos. Ryuji Furuya says it's every man for himself in the dungeon and he won't take responsibility for those who ignore his warnings, and asks why the school doesn't ban students from entering. He reports that this semester they created a special class for outstanding international students, but because of this, everyone from Class A onwards wants to show the international students that they are just as good. He explains that they occupy leading positions in world rankings. Ryuji Furuya thinks about Grafniel and says that show-offs and pride are no longer necessary. The boy explains that he tried to stop Grafnio Krinvich, but it was no use. He says he's not going to change his mind. The man thanks her and says it was nice talking to him. The girl asks the director not to give up so quickly. The guy tells Furuya that if she changes her mind, she should contact him, and Ryuji Furuya says that he is not worried and will not change his mind. The woman says she's just curious about the man's business. The man says he and Yamada agreed to attend the Comic-Con 6 months ago. A guy asks about the Comic-Con. Ryuji Furuya tells him that his favorite artist will be there this time, and that attendees will be given limited edition figurines from The Heroine's Seven Men. He explains that the artist will be arriving on the third day, and he wants to receive that very figurine on the first day. The man apologizes for not hearing him because he was speaking so fast. He explains that in high school, he didn't have the money for events like this, and all he could do was cry, but now nothing will come between him and Comic-Con. He says he's so excited he might not sleep for the whole night. Ryuji Furuya says that's exactly it, and asks not to say it rudely, as he might get angry. The man says that Ryuji is going to an anime exhibition for some limited stuff. He says that even if he doesn't receive a figurine every day, he can always buy it at an auction or resell it. The man explains that Furuya has a lot of money. Ryuji Furuya says it's nothing, and says he's leaving. The man apologizes for saying too much, and says it's creepy. He says he's surprised and didn't think anyone else had been to another world. He explains that he'd like to talk to this person again, but until the VSR ends, it's impossible. He says that if they do become friends, it will only add to the... Ryuji Furuya says it's best to focus on the 3 days of Comic-Con ahead of him, because it will be a real battle. The scene above announces that this is the first day of random placement, and the action takes place in the Ueno Park dungeon on the 11th floor. On the right, a man casts a shadow binding spell. A distant cry for help can be heard on the left. Ryuji Furuya reports that the stealth skill, sneak attack, and critical hit, as well as paralysis, poison, and enchantment. He reports that the level 25 assassin's shadow binding didn't work, and his knife didn't even scratch the enemy. He then abruptly leaps away from the giant spider. Ryuji Furuya says he's too strong for the 11th floor, and says that's why it's random. A woman announces that she will die. A girl with a sword and shield prepares to fight a huge spider, while another girl in the distance also prepares to attack. Countess Krinvich and Lady Isabella turn to the A-class students and Assassin Tanaka, asking if they were injured. Assassin Tanaka reports that everything is fine and thanks them for saving her, while Countess Krinvich notes the speed of the enemy with a level. The guy tells the Assassin Tanaka not to be here, otherwise everyone would have died long ago, and the man explains that he did nothing. The girl says she'll move on. The man thanks the Assassin Tanaka for his help, and the girl says that this is a special class and asks where everyone else is. The man reports that everyone else went down to the 36th floor because their party was tired and couldn't go past the 35th. Ryuji Furuya says the 36 is a joke. The man explains that Sanzanin and Ue were with them, so the research proceeded without any problems. He says that the 36th floor is a bad thing. Ryuji Furuya announces that tomorrow is the most important day, and the robot says the master is in a good mood. Ryuji Furuya listens. The man in the suit asks if Takaka is a level 25 assassin. The woman apologizes for coming uninvited, turning to Ryuji Furuya. Ryuji remains silent. The woman explains that she has to get up early tomorrow, so she says goodbye. Then the doorbell rings, and the woman is surprised. Ryuji Furuya tells him to be quiet, and the man says it's an urgent matter. The man explains that this isn't a casual conversation, and Ryuji Furuya says, to hell with it, and asks him to say what he wants. Ryuji Furuya asks if the man intends to go any further, to which he replies, yes. The woman explains that, unlike regular schools, theirs specializes exclusively in adventurers and asks why they got approval for the program so quickly. The girl replies that she has no idea since she doesn't build schools. The woman explains that they received help from people at the top. The Prime Minister saw the project as an excellent investment. She adds, Ryuji Furuya announces that there are 2 minutes left. The man explains that the principal has long been worried that the Prime Minister won't risk his approval ratings and will likely abolish the school. He explains that if too many people die at the WSR, the public will come to the conclusion that the school should be closed. He informs them that Countess Krinvich Sanzain Ayano and Ue Hanfia are the three main beauties of the school and the pride of the institution. The man says he is happy for them. He explains that he has 25 figurines of the beauties at home and asks for them. Ryuji Furuya says Tanaka is worrying too much and that he's already released a warning video which Tanaka would like to believe. Tanaka asks what floor it would be safe to go down to with 3 level 40 adventurers. Ryuji Furuya says that he doesn't. The woman explains that no one would go down that deep, so they should trust Furuya, and that continuing to talk to him would only worsen his relationship with them. He asks her to explain why the 37th floor is so dangerous and says it will only take 10 seconds. The woman says that's already the case. The top right text states that the action is currently taking place in the Ueno Park dungeon on the 36th floor. On the right, a man is screaming and a girl is saying hee while watching a dragon. The girl shouts, Ayano. Ayano says, and says Geisberg. Ryuji Furuya says you have to be fast. The right panel shows a luminous stream accompanied by sounds. The left panel shows the head of a creature from whose mouth this stream is erupting. The girl lands and screams. She falls sharply, breaking through the floor. The guy reports what happened. The man screams, oh. The woman says, Yahoo. The guy says that they have a lot of rare loot, that's why they have VSR, and asks how much they'll get for all this. He says he can buy himself an apartment in a high-rise building. The man says they'll become famous. The girl says they'll improve their lives. The man says they'll live happily ever after. A man says he doesn't even feel like he's in VSR right now, and another man says it was an easy victory. The girl screams that without her and Ayano, everyone would have died long ago, and declares that this is no joke. The man says it really helped them that they joined them. Ryuji Furuya says, yeah. The girl says they didn't join. The woman says she and Ayano are here to stop him. The girl explains they helped because the other guy was in danger. The man says Ue's legs are amazing, and the woman explains that when she gets angry, her Japanese gets worse and it's really cute. The girl says that it is very selfish of them to throw themselves into danger like that, and that they are only ruining the reputation of the adventurer school. The man says he's in shock, and the other man says doesn't care if they die. The woman explains she thought they were friends and asks if that's what is like. Says no and that she didn't say that. The man says he knew Ryuji Furuya cared about his classmates and tells them they can go down to the next floor. Ryuji Furuya thanks them for their help. The woman asks Ayano for help, addressing her by name, and Ayano says, guys. The girl says that the previous battle was a bit dangerous and warns that next time you might get hurt. The woman says that she is a real princess from the noble Sanzang family and that her breasts are second in size only to Isabella's. The guy says she usually only talks to Yuji. Ryuji Furuya says they're huge. The girl says she wants to see them too. The girl with short blonde hair says it's all written on the guys' faces. The woman says they've already demonstrated the capabilities of the special class sufficiently, adding, well, the man with glasses says that's true and they've achieved their goal, and the guy with short dark hair explains that most of the A-class left on the 10th floor. The girl in the hat confirms this. The girl says, why don't they finish the research on this floor this time? The guy tells what they're going to do, and Ryuji Furuya tells Sanzen. The guy says they can't go any deeper and explains that the previous monster was strong, but they were able to defeat it. The woman explains that, according to and Sanzan, the dungeon is dangerous during the VSR, but it's precisely through this that money and reputation can be earned for the school, and asks if she's right. The man confirms that's true, and the woman says it's at least worth a try. The guy tells Ue and Sanzin that they'll be going on their own from here. The woman thanks them. The man says, The girl says they've left and asks what they should do, and the woman explains that perhaps they were so excited by their victory that they've completely forgotten how to think. The woman says she's low on mana and says they're also taking a big risk. The woman tells him to consider her cold-blooded, but everyone who goes down into the dungeons and puts their lives on the line will die. Not even a corpse will remain. Then she says, let's leave. The girl agrees. The woman informs them that there are many traps in this castle and advises them to proceed with caution. The girl explains that they must be prepared for any unexpected events and be aware of their surroundings. The girl asks if everything will be all right with them. The woman explains that an adventurer's main task is to retrieve the resources they've obtained from the dungeon and warns that if they don't know their limits, they can get into trouble, which applies to both of them. The girl says that it is true. The girl says that Kentakashi from their class should be in the rescue team on the first floor, but the woman remains silent. The woman says she is worried about her classmates, but right now she needs to prioritize her and Hanfa's safety. The girl is silent. The mentor tells Hanfa that his task is not to defeat a superior enemy, but to protect the weak. Hanfa answers the mentor. Ryuji Furuya says he can't abandon them and apologizes to Ayano. Ayano asks if it's Hanfa. The girl says she'll go with her. The woman explains it's dangerous and unnecessary. The man asks if they're the only ones here and identifies the girl as Sanzin Ue. Isabella asks where everyone else is. Two women happily call Isabella. Isabella confirms. The woman says the monsters are too strong, their mother is running low, and that their classmates have gone down to the 37th floor alone. Ryuji Furuya says things are bad. Isabella says hi. The woman says hello. Isabella asks what. On the street, a man announces that he's a level 25 assassin, and the word run is heard. Downstairs, a woman asks if someone passed by, and the man asks if it's a human. Ryuji Furuya says that it's too crowded and that they need to hurry or the students will die, and asks where he is. The man announces that the 9 men figurine slots are full, and there's no need to line up. He says he caught the very first train, but barely made it anyway, and that the 9 men are too popular. The man explains that Ryu already has the official figurine. Assassin Tanaka announces that he has found Ryuji Furuya and calls him by name. Ryuji Furuya asks why he is here and calls him Assassin Tanaka. The man smiles. The man announces that Ryuji is urgently needed in the Ueno Park underground, explaining that they were able to recall almost all the students, but the special class has descended to the 36th floor and is most likely already descending to the 37th. Ryuji expresses surprise. The man announces that the line is moving, turning to Ryuji Furuya, who listens with a tense expression. Then Ryuji Furuya looks ahead, focused. The guy asks the assassin Tanaka to take his figurine, and he says that Yamada will explain everything and says that he really wanted to do it himself. The man says he owes Ryuji Furuya and asks to leave the merch in his name, and Ryuji Furuya remarks that he's having a hard time. Ryuji Furuya tells Yamada he'll explain everything later, and Yamada says he understands and asks him to hurry. The man says that they are asking people not to run in the building because it's dangerous. The man explains to Mr. Tanaka that he should say Gyu instead of Jiji. The girl says that she can't believe that they went down deeper and still during the VSR. Then she tells Sanzin and Yue that they need to hurry. The girl explains that if they just show up, they will only anger the dragons, and that is too dangerous, and the woman says that it is better to hide and observe the situation. Ryuji Furuya says he can't just hide and watch, he'll help them openly. The girl asks, "And you, Ayano? That's why you're nobles, you can only complicate things." The girl with the hat explains that she's honest and open. The girl is surprised, and so is Iz. The text block states that the action takes place on the 37th floor. A man with dreadlocks says that they are already on the 37th floor and that there are only 13 floors left. A man with glasses explains that if they keep walking at the same pace, they will reach the top in 10 minutes. The man says he was ridiculed as a simple thief, but he was able to level up to a top adventurer and even understands perfectly well that they cannot escape the monster and that they will die here. The woman explains that it's not just any eye, but the eye of a dragon. The man explains that the dragon is an ancient and powerful creature capable of destroying entire cities. The woman explains that the dragon has awakened and now threatens the entire world. The woman says she'll go ahead, the girl says yes, and the woman replies, uh-huh. Ryuji Furuya says he wanted to teleport straight to Ueno Park, but the toilet was just full. The girl reports that she ran into a student yesterday. He was standing nearby and listening. The girl says he's at least level 50, and she can't get him out of her head. She says that's enough. She needs to focus on something else now and needs to get to floor 37 as quickly as possible. The woman says they are in the underground of Ueno Park on the 36th floor. The woman tells them the title of the manga and the names of the authors. The festival area. Ryuji Furuya says they need to hurry, otherwise the entire special class could die, but if someone sees him use the teleporter, things could only get worse, as magic is prohibited outside of dungeons. A man notices a door with a sign prohibiting entry to outsiders and pays attention to it. He looks towards the closing door. The man says that no one is allowed in and asks them to stop. Then he asks what happened. The man reports that no one is there. Ryuji Furuya silently lowers his gaze. In the upper right corner, a man asks for help, saying his friend is dying and expressing pain. A woman next to him pleads for help, expressing that he doesn't understand what's happening. Ryuji Furuya says he's warned them so many times and asks if everyone ignored his advice. He explains he doesn't have time to help everyone and needs to hurry to the 37th floor. A man asks for help and says he